Chapter 263. Before he had met this child, especially when this child, whom he had never met before, had asked him to stay away from his mommy through the phone, he had only found it amusing and amusing. How capable could a child be? He had coldly warned him not to bully his mommy again, or else he would be irreconcilable with him. At that time, he had only admired this child. He was arrogant, courageous, and had inherited his bloodline of decisiveness. Even his tone was 100% similar to his. However, when he saw this child with his own eyes, his heart ached. This child and Xiao-Chen were twins. He could not help but sigh at the divine and miraculous nature of the Creator. Unlike other twins, this child's facial features and face were exactly the same. If the two of them wore the same clothes and stood next to each other without any expression, he would not even be able to tell who was who. However, upon closer inspection, there were some subtle differences. Xiao-Chen's eyes were more like his. They were deep and ethereal, with long and narrow eyes. His eyelashes were thick like the feathers of a phoenix, and his nose bridge was high and straight. The tip of his nose was upturned, forming an arrogant arc. However, the casual gentleness between his eyebrows reminded him of Yun-Shir. His small mouth, the outline of his face, and the color of his lips were like hers. Yu-Yu's eyes, on the other hand, were a little more like hers. The black and white were distinct. His jet-black pupils were watery, as if they were hiding a beautiful starry night. They were like pitch black and translucent agate stones. His nose bridge was high and straight like his, while his lips were pink and tender, moist and glossy like hers. Xiao-Chen had always been well-developed, and his height had shot up very quickly. Although he was only 6 years old, when he stood next to him, he was as tall as his waist. His delicate face was rosy and healthy, and his cheeks were chubby with a little baby fat. He could not help but want to kiss them. On the other hand, Yu was a little on the skinny side. Yun-Shir had always been very attentive when it came to nutrition, but perhaps the child did not absorb it well, for his height could keep up with his growth, but there was not much meat on his body. He was thin and small. Although he was about the same height as Little Chen, at a glance, his wrist was so thin that he could easily hold it with 2 fingers. Yu, Yun-Shir called out to him. Yu opened his eyes slightly. Seeing that he was awake, Yun-Shir was both surprised and happy. She hugged him and said sympathetically, Yu, you're awake. Mommy is late. I'm sorry. Yu's delicate little face cringed slightly, and he pouted. His watery eyes were filled with tears of grievance. He rubbed against her arms longingly and grumbled, Mommy, why are you only here now? Yu's been waiting for you for a long time. Yu thought that Mommy didn't want Yu anymore. Sob. Yu hugged Yun-Shir's neck with his little hands and rested his head on her shoulder in satisfaction. He rubbed against her like a kitten, greedily enjoying the warmth in her arms. However, when he suddenly opened his eyes and saw the man standing by the bed, his soft smile froze on his lips. Muyage's footsteps were very light. He stood at the head of the bed for a long time and quietly sized him up without making a sound. However, when Yu opened his eyes and saw the man by the bed, his face turned cold and gloomy with his back facing Yun-Shir. Chapter 264. It's him? Why is he here? He had thought that his mommy had come alone. Why did she bring this man along? Yu's expression tensed up. His thin lips formed a stiff line as he felt displeased. This was the first time Yin Tianyu looked at this man up close. The first time he saw his biological father was in a financial magazine. Initially, he thought that the photo had been edited. Otherwise, how could there be such a perfect man in this world? He was handsome, mature, and had an extraordinary temperament, especially that cold and resolute face. Even though it was a cold photo, people couldn't help but be intimidated by it. The last time he saw him was at a gala. He clearly saw this man's handsome features and tall figure. It turned out that this perfect man existed in reality, too. At this moment, the father and son were facing each other. He looked at the little lad, and the latter sized him up with an appraising gaze. His eyes gradually filled with disbelief. He was an outstanding man. He was also a domineering man. He should be like him, a very possessive man. An extremely powerful aura emanated from his body. Wherever he went, the aura emanating from his body would spread to every corner. This was his biological father. When he was young, he did not have a father. When he saw other children with fathers, he was envious and confused. Why was it that when other children were a family of 3, their left hand holding mommies and right hand holding daddies, his right hand was empty? He often saw other children sitting on their father's shoulders. Every time he saw this scene, he was envious. His father was such a tall figure. It was as if, with him by his side, he had nothing to fear in this world. If there was a man of indomitable spirit in the family, he and Mommy would not be looked down upon by others, much less be bullied, right? However, as he grew older, he began to resent his father's image. Why did Daddy not want him and Mommy anymore? He had asked his Mommy a few times, but she had always evaded the question and had never given him a proper answer. Gradually, he became indifferent to the concept of a father. If there was no man, he would become a man. He would protect his Mommy at all costs and by hook or by crook. Perhaps, in Lee Hamlin's eyes, Yun Tinyo's maturity was not something an ordinary child could compare to. What he did not know was that Yu was only arming himself with his weak side and carefully hiding it. In front of Yun Shir, he was a sensible, well-behaved, and extremely obedient boy. In front of Lee Hamlin, he was black-bellied, steady, and extraordinarily charismatic. He did not need a father. He did not want to share his Mommy's love with anyone else. At this thought, Yu's little hands hugged his Mommy's shoulders. This man was really taking over his Mommy's life step by step. He couldn't just sit back and watch. "Mommy, why haven't you come home for 2 days?" "There's only Yu at home." Yu is so scared. Yin Tianyu rested his small face on his mother's shoulder. His small lips opened and closed as he cried out in a trembling voice. His childish voice was hoarse and choked with sobs, making anyone who heard it feel heartache. Chapter 265. Yin Shir was hugging Yin Tianyu, so she could not see the expression on his face. However, when she heard the little lad's tearful complaints, her heart broke. Sorry. Yu, Mommy is wrong. Mommy won't leave Yu alone at home anymore. It's Mommy's fault this time. Yu, you can punish Mommy however you want." Muyaja stood by the bed with furrowed brows. This little lad was young, but he was quite scheming. He even knew how to make use of his Mommy's guilt toward him. Although he spoke coquettishly, he glared at him coldly. He could not help but marvel at his superb acting skills. Yin Tianyu raised a brow and threw a cold glance at Muyaja. He then softly said to Yin Shir, "Stupid Mommy, how can you bear to punish Mommy? Mommy must have had something on last night, so she couldn't come back. Yu doesn't blame Mommy, but don't leave Yu alone next time. Yu is really scared." With that, his lips curled up slightly, as if he was showing off to the man. He then coquettishly said, "Mommy, if I must punish you, then I'll punish you by making you accompany Yu to bed every night and telling Yu stories. Okay, pinky promise. You can't go back on your words." Yu stretched out his pinky and hooked it. Yun Shir gently wiped away the heartache in her eyes and hooked her pinky with his. "Pinky promise." Yu's eyes curved gently. He rested his forehead on Yun Shir's and rubbed it coquettishly. He pouted and said, "Mommy, Yu forgives you. Yu, good boy." Yin Tianyu suddenly looked at Muyaja and pretended to be surprised. Mommy, who is this uncle?" Yin Shir's expression turned awkward. He didn't know that Yu already knew his identity. Now that little munchkin mentioned it, he didn't know what to do. How should he introduce them? Could it be that Yu, this is your daddy? Yu would be terrified. For 6 years, he had never mentioned anything about his biological father in front of the child. Now that he was suddenly told that he had a father, it was naturally difficult for him to accept. When she thought of this, her expression became extremely ugly. She subconsciously looked behind her and glanced at the man beside the bed. The latter was looking at her, as if he was also waiting for her to explain. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air and could not help pursing her lips in distress. She really didn't know how to introduce him. Usually, her life was split between work and home, so she didn't have many friends. She had met a few of her friends, colleagues, and Yu. Although the child was young, He was very meticulous. While she was hesitating, Lee Hamlin suddenly coughed lightly and secretly signaled Yu with his eyes. Muyaja turned to look at him. He immediately retracted his gaze and looked down. At the side, Yin Shishir suddenly reacted and explained with a smile, Yu, this is Mommy's university professor. His surname is Mu, and he took good care of Mommy when we were in school. She rarely lied, so she felt a little guilty. After Yin Shishir introduced him, she secretly looked at the man's expression. Muyaja still had a gentle smile on his face. He didn't deny it, nor did he reveal any other emotions. However, when he looked at her from the corner of his eyes, there was a hidden meaning in them that she couldn't fathom. Lee Hamlin snickered at the side. Chapter 266. Yin Tianyo's expression did not reveal any surprise, but his eyebrows twitched subtly. Lee Hamlin snickered at the side. This mother-son pair was really something. The son lied to his mother that his personal assistant was the kindergarten principal, while the mother lied to her son that the child's biological father was a university professor. The father-son pair was really something. They knew each other's identity, and the only one who was kept in the dark was Yin Shishir. Yin Shishir would never have guessed that the little rascal would be unaware of Mu Yaja's identity. Did she really think that Yin Tianyu was a 6-year-old child? Lee Hamlin's lips twitched at the thought of this. Ahem. All right. Yin Tianyu was indeed a 6-year-old child. Yin Tianyu chuckled and greeted him gently. So, you're Mommy's university professor. You look really young, though. About 27 or 28. There was a gentle smile on her face, but her eyes were fixed on the man, and there was a faint taste of gnashing teeth. Muyaja chuckled. The little lad's eyes were really sharp. He could tell his age at a glance. Thus, he stretched out his slender hand and held the little fellow's little hand. The man's hand was broad and warm, fair and smooth, and his fingers were long and slender. The little lad's hand, however, was slightly cold. Although it was chubby, it was slightly pale. Due to Yin Shishir's presence, Yin Tianyu could not shake off his hand. He could only put on a fake smile, feeling extremely awkward inside. Muyaja smiled and held his hand. He said lightly, Little Yu, you can call me Uncle Mu. His voice was mellow and charming. Like aged wine, it was easy to get intoxicated. Yin Shishir was a little surprised. She did not expect this man to go along with her lie. His expression was so natural, as if he were really her university professor. Yin Tianyu smiled unnaturally. Uncle Mu, you must be very busy. Thank you so much for coming to see me so late. Mommy was taken care of by you in university. I must have caused you a lot of trouble, right? Muyaja raised his eyes and looked deeply at Yin Shishir. He chuckled and said, No, your mommy is usually very obedient. For some reason, when he said this, there was a deeper meaning behind it. Yin Shishir turned her face away unnaturally, and the corners of her lips were a little stiff. Just as they were exchanging pleasantries, someone knocked on the door respectfully. Shortly after, a man in a suit let a few of Yin Tianyo's attending doctors in. Yin Shishir was a little surprised. She recognized this man. This man in a suit was the director of this hospital, Meng Qingyang. But why was he here? While he was in doubt, he saw Meng Qingyang walk to Mu Yaja's side with a respectful and warm smile. He had just received news that the young master of the Mu family, the young CEO of the Mu Group, had appeared in his hospital. He had rushed over immediately. Although he did not know why he was suddenly here, this was a big deal. One must know that even if the sky were to collapse, this distinguished person must not be neglected. Of course, he must be treated well. One must know that in the future, he still had to rely on this big shot. Chapter 267. Meng Qingyang was dumbfounded by his words. Student? Father? Meng Qingyang glanced at Yin Shishir, who was standing at the side with a stupefied expression. He pondered for a moment, and although he did not quite understand what was going on, he knew how to judge the situation. Thus, he cooperated and said, Hello, Mr. Mu. As he spoke, he sized up the beautiful woman standing at the side. For a moment, he could not figure out her identity. She looked quite obedient. Judging for her attire, she did not look like a student, but her appearance was still young and her face was unbelievably beautiful. As he thought of this, he hummed politely in agreement with his remark. Is this Mr. Mu's student? One look, and I can tell that she's a talented woman. Yun Shur exchanged pleasantries with an embarrassed look on her face. The corner of Lee Hamlin's mouth twitched. Everyone in the room, be it old or young, male or female, was acting. Were they all good at acting? Mu Yaja surveyed the ward. Narrowing his eyes, he slowly said, This ward seems a little shabby. It's not suitable for the patient to recuperate. As soon as his cold voice fell, Meng Qingyang broke out in a cold sweat. He smiled apologetically and nodded his head repeatedly. He then turned to reprimand the attending doctor. Indeed, this ward was too shabby, but it could not be helped. Lee Hamlin originally wanted to arrange a VIP ward for Yun Tianyu, but the latter was worried that his mother would be suspicious, so he arranged for the most ordinary ward. Thus, Lee Hamlin paid for the ordinary ward. Meng Qingyang broke out in a cold sweat, and so did the attending doctor beside him. Before this, how could he have expected that the patient in this ward would be related to such a big shot? If he had known earlier, not to mention the ICU ward, even the only VIP ward in the inpatient department would be vacated for him. Yes, I'll change this child's ward to the VIP ward right away. Yin Shur stared at them with her mouth agape. In her memory, this attending doctor was quite unreasonable and treated people coldly. In short, she did not have a good impression of him. However, when they saw the hospital director and several attending doctors beside him, who were usually serious in speech and manner, bowing in front of Muyaja, they could not help but secretly click their tongues. After exchanging some pleasantries, Meng Qingyang walked out of the ward. Meng Qingyang's eyebrows relaxed, and his face relaxed. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After walking a little further, he turned around and asked Zhao Rui behind him, Zhao Rui, let me ask you, is the patient in that ward? Background? Zhao Rui was confused. Nothing special. He's just an ordinary patient. Take special care of him in the future. Vacate that intensive care unit and let him stay there. Send me the best specialist and nutritionist. There can't be the slightest bit of negligence. Then he instructed meticulously, if the patient has any requests, as long as they are not too demanding, try your best to satisfy them. Why? Zhao Rui was puzzled. Meng Qingyang asked, Do you know who the man sitting by the bed in the ward is? Zhao Rui shook his head in confusion. Anyway, he has a big background. Not to mention you, even I have to look at his face for a living. Chapter 268. Just thinking about it scared him. Anyway, Meng Qingyang left with a peace of mind after giving him detailed instructions. Zhao Rui did not know the inside story, but as a doctor, his duty was to take care of people's problems. This was his job, so he would not neglect it. After sitting in the ward for a while, Yu suddenly looked up at Yin Shur and said coquettishly, Mommy, Yu is hungry. It's empty. Is it growling? As he spoke, he pouted and silently flattened his little belly. His pair of innocent eyes blinked at her, looking very aggrieved. Yin Shur immediately asked gently, Yu, what do you want to eat? Mommy will go to the supermarket to buy it for you. There are many 24-hour convenience stores and cake shops near the hospital. It was very convenient to cross the road. But so late. Yu is really worried. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He clasped his hands together and said softly to Lee Hamlin, Principal, why don't you accompany my mommy? Lee Hamlin immediately understood and nodded. Yin Shur was a little embarrassed and declined. No, thank you. Yu, it's so late now. Why don't you let the principal go home early? It's okay. The principal has always been very kind. Mommy, you're so weak. What if a bad uncle kidnaps you in the middle of the night? Principal Lee is very powerful. He can protect you. Yeah, it's not too late anyway. I'll accompany you to buy things, send you upstairs, and go home. Don't worry about it. I like you very much. I already treat him as my own son. As soon as Lee Hamlin finished speaking, he suddenly felt the sharp gaze of the man beside him, which was as sharp as a knife, on his face. Muyaja looked up and fixed his cold eyes on him. There was a hint of displeasure in his expression. It was as if he was questioning his words. Treat him as your own son? If looks could kill, he would have been cut into pieces. Lee Hanlon took out a handkerchief and wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. This father and son were so alike. The little one's aura was already intimidating enough. The bigger one's legs would turn to jelly with just one look. At that moment, the atmosphere in the ward was a little strange. Muyaja, Little Munchkin, and Lee Hanlon exchanged glances. Yin Shirshir did not notice anything unusual about the three of them. She only thanked Lee Hanlon gratefully. "Thank you, Principal. I still don't know how to thank you for this matter. It's so late. Let me treat you to a cup of coffee." The two of them were about to leave, but before they could step out of the ward, she felt a tug on her arm and was pulled back. Muyaja had one hand in his belt. He leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, "Come back soon, okay? I don't like you being with other men." Muyaja breathed into her ear with a devilish smile, but there was a hint of warning in his eyes. Yin Shirshir's face turned red from his domineering and ambiguous words. She glared at him with her clear eyes, wanting to say something. "Who are you to control me? Isn't it my freedom to be with whoever I want?" "Little mouth, you're quite fierce, huh?" Muyaja was displeased. He gently bit her lip, not caring that they were in front of Lee Hanlon. Lee Hanlon stood at the side, not knowing where to look. Chapter 269. Fooling around? How is this fooling around? Yin Shirshir lowered her voice. "Don't be naughty in front of the child." Muyaja's lips curled into a devilish smile, but he did not heed her advice. As if deliberately going against her, he kissed her on the lips again. Lee Hanlon was caught off guard by the public display of affection. He didn't even have a chance to dodge. His mouth was stuffed with a bulging bag of dog food. He only felt that he was so redundant standing there and couldn't wait to escape. Yin Tianyu, who was sitting on the bed, was stunned by the man's abrupt action. From his angle, he couldn't see what the man was doing. He could only see that he was lowering his body, and his well-proportioned body almost blocked his line of sight. He could only vaguely see that his mommy's face was flushed with an ambiguous blush. At that moment, something seemed to explode in his head. He angrily grabbed the pillow and punched it. Still, he could not help but ask with a fake smile, "Mommy, what are you and Uncle Mu doing?" Yin Shirshir awkwardly pushed Muyaja away at once. The man's face did not show any signs of unnaturalness. He raised a finger and slowly said, "Shh, I'm whispering to your mommy." The devilish smile on his face was obviously a blatant provocation to him. Yun Tianyo's lips curled into a smile, but the expression in his eyes had long been distorted beyond recognition. The corner of the blanket in his hand was also crumpled into a ball from his ravaging. Yin Shirshir, who was standing at the side, felt even more awkward. Whispering, "This man is really..." Yin Shirshir suppressed her anger and smilingly said to her son, "Mommy will go buy bread for you now. You must be good and not run around in bed." With that, she warned Muyaja, "Professor Mu, please take care of my Yu. I'll be back soon." With that, Yin Shirshir and Lee Hanlon left the room. Just as the door to the ward closed, the father and son faced each other in the room. Yin Tianyo's smiling face turned cold all of a sudden. The gentle and doting smile on the little lad's face when he looked at Yin Shirshir earlier had long since disappeared. Muyaja looked at his serious expression. For a moment, he seemed to see his younger self in him. She was always cold and emotionless. She was always in a defensive posture, completely sealing herself in her own world. She had never opened her heart to anyone. Yin Tianyu looked at him coldly. His eyes were filled with vigilance, scrutiny, and indifference. Muyaja couldn't help but smile. He couldn't help but walk forward and sit beside the bed. Facing him sideways, he slowly reached out his hand and gently stroked his cold cheek. Yin Tianyo's face froze as his body stiffened. Almost subconsciously, he raised his hand and slapped the man's hand away. "Don't touch me." His words were cold and emotionless. There was only indifference. Thinking of his provocative behavior in front of him, he was filled with displeasure. Muyaja raised a brow in surprise. This little bun seemed to be full of hostility toward him. When Yin Shirshir was around, he could still put on a smile to deal with him. When Yin Shirshir was not around, the little bun could not even be bothered to put on a pretense in front of him. He suddenly felt that this little bun had inherited some aspects from his mommy. Chapter 270. He raised his eyes and stared coldly at Muyaja. Expressionlessly, he flipped the blanket aside and got off the bed. He slowly walked to the window, leaned against the wall, and crossed his arms. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be at home, accompanying your fiancée at this time? You're always pestering my mommy. It's so annoying. The moment he opened his mouth, the first word was full of thorns. It pierced through him so coldly that it was painful. Muyaja was not at all surprised by his indifferent and cold tone. This child was too sensitive. He carefully hid his most vulnerable side. Muyaja saw him leaning against the wall, as if the huge wall was his only support at this moment. Are you very pleased with yourself? Muyaja looked at him with a raised brow. The little lad pursed his lips tightly. At this moment, he was like a little beast that had lost control and no sense of security. He hugged his arms tightly and suppressed all his anger and uneasiness. He repeated his words again. Are you very pleased with yourself for bullying my mommy in front of me? Muyaja? He called him by his name. Muyaja was not angry at all. He only curled his lips and slowly said, According to seniority, you should call me Daddy. Daddy? Yin Tianyo's good-looking brow arched. On what basis? Muyaja said, On the basis that my blood flows in your veins. Is this answer enough? The father and son, one big and one small, formed two extremes that were like fire and water. Yin Tianyo's eyes turned cold. Is it enough? Not enough. He suddenly raised his arrogant chin and stared straight at the man's handsome face. His tender voice revealed a firmness that could not be ignored. Do you think that just because we are related by blood, I should call you Daddy? I'm 6 this year. 6 years old. Have we met in the past 6 years? Have you ever fulfilled your responsibility as a father? Now, you suddenly appear out of nowhere and want me to acknowledge you as my daddy? As he spoke, his frail body began to tremble. Yin Tianyo's brows furrowed tightly. He lowered his head and gripped his wrist tightly, as if he could suppress the anger in his heart. He lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, Muyaja, I think you're mistaken about something. It's not because we are related by blood that I should recognize you as my father. Muyaja was stunned. Yin Tianyu looked up at him and sneered. Did you carry me when I was born? When I'm afraid of the dark at night, had you ever sung a nursery rhyme beside my bed to coax me to sleep? When I was bullied by other children, did you comfort me by my side? When I was in kindergarten, all the children were taken home by their fathers. Where were you? Where were you when Mommy was being bullied? Now 6 years have passed. You appear out of nowhere and want me to call you Daddy. Muyaja, do you think you're qualified? His tone was not agitated, and his voice was calm and steady as usual. However, his childish voice was faintly trembling. Even though he was calmly narrating something that had happened to someone else, his words were laced with blood and tears that had long since dried up. Yin Tianyu coldly said, You'll never know how Mommy and I have spent the past 6 years. Chapter 271. That's right. I didn't know that I had a father like you. Yin Tianyu continued solemnly. When I first saw you in the magazine, I honestly felt agitated, wronged, and regretful. After a pause, the little lad raised his head and his lips curled into a mournful smile. What I'm excited about is that I actually have a biological daddy. Moreover, the man who gave birth to me is so outstanding and outstanding. I was aggrieved because where were you for the past 6 years? Regretfully, no matter how outstanding you are, I can't entrust Mommy to you. Muyaja's brows knitted tightly together. The little lad's accusation made his heart clench and almost suffocate him. It was not that he did not feel heartache. His heart ached so much that it felt as if a heavy rock was pressing down on it, making it hard for him to breathe. Initially, he was a little surprised by his son's intelligence, but more than that, he was astonished. He and Xiaoi Chen were twins, but unlike Xiaoi Chen, this child was more mature and steady. This level of maturity was not something that someone his age should have. 6 years old was the most innocent age in child's life. Children at this age were more likely to enjoy the innocence and beauty of childhood. He, however, bore a burden that children his age should not bear. This maturity was only natural, though. Little Yi Chen had been doted on ever since he was born. With him as the center, Mu Sheng's love, as well as his doting, had never stopped revolving. Even Mu Wanru, who was not close to him, had always indulged him in all matters, big or small. Although she was not his biological mother, Mu Wanru still fulfilled her duty as a mother. Yin Tianyu was different, though. He did not breathe the moment he was born. There were only weak signs of life, and he almost lost his life. Relying on his innate survival instinct, he let out a weak cry and came into this world. However, he did not have Xiao Yichin's health and liveliness from birth. Before he was 2 years old, he had experienced physical torture and pain. Gradually, he realized that his body was not as healthy as other children. He also realized that he was different from other children. When he returned home, he was already used to Li Qin and Yun Na's sarcasm, ostracism, and unbearable humiliation. His childhood without a father was accompanied by bullying and humiliation, but he was never willing to mention it to Yin Shishir. Because of this, his mature personality was formed. Yin Tianyu clenched his fists tightly. Suddenly, he relaxed them, and his voice returned to its usual coldness. Since I was born, I only have a mommy and no daddy. I didn't have one before, and I won't have one in the future. Muyaja asked, biting his lower lip hard. He coldly spat out, "That's because I don't need it." His voice fell, but there was a long silence. Until he spoke again. "I like you very much." Yun Tianyu, his body stiffened, his shoulders trembled. He asked gently, "Don't you like me?" She carefully probed him, trying to find out his true intentions. Yin suddenly, "Yin st tai like you a lot." These 5 words seemed to have some irresistible magic. In an instant, his uneasy heart calmed down, and his face flushed with shyness. Chapter 272. I don't need you to like me. It's enough that mommy likes me. This child was actually a little arrogant. I've told you before that you're not allowed to provoke my mommy. Muyaja, do you think I can't do anything to you? Muyaja did not make a sound. Looking at his reddened face, which was full of awkwardness and hostility, he curled his lips. The ward was silent for a moment. After a long silence, Muyaja stood up abruptly. His tall figure instantly made the entire ward seem small and narrow. The man's aura was so strong that Yu had no choice but to puff out his chest. Alas, it was to no avail that his aura was completely suppressed in front of the man. The father and son stood facing each other. The height difference was so big that Yu could only raise his head to look at him. His neck was a little sore. He was so tall. Just like what he had imagined, his father was really tall and upright. His stalwart body seemed to be able to withstand all kinds of wind and waves. It was indestructible. When he first met him at the gala, he could not help feeling envious of his outstanding height. How nice would it be if he could grow up to be as tall as him? However, now that this man was standing before him, he realized that he was more handsome than he had imagined. It was not that he did not feel envious. Yin Tianyu muttered inwardly, "He is so tall. Can't he squat down?" He raised his head to look at him. His height alone was enough to suppress him. As if telepathy between father and son, Muyaja seemed to have guessed his thoughts. He walked forward and half-squatted in front of him. Yin Tianyu was startled. This man was friendlier than he had imagined. Yin Tianyu. Muyaja calmly gazed at his face. His large palm gently caressed his cheek. This time, for the first time, Yin Tianyu did not resist his touch. Or perhaps, when he gently called his name, the man's deep and mellow voice was tinged with tenderness. It was exceptionally pleasant to the ears. He sized up the man. The man was also sizing up the stubborn little munchkin in front of him. However, the boy did not notice that the man's fingertips were trembling slightly as they caressed his cheek. Little Munchkin's handsome and adorable face, his skin was soft and supple, and his pair of dark and watery eyes seemed to be hiding the beautiful moonlight. 6 years ago, he had thought that the child had unfortunately died. However, when the child stood in front of him in perfect condition, the man who had always been calm and steady lost control. "Do you know who I am?" "I know." Yin Tianyu, too, calmly looked into Muyaja's eyes and slowly said, "Dishing Financial Group, Sale Muyaja. You're so smart." Muyaja gently pinched his son's cheeks, his eyes full of undisguised affection. "That's nonsense." Yun Tianyu retorted bluntly. Muyaja said, "You're a little different from what I imagined." "Oh, what's the difference?" Yu was a little curious. The man frowned slightly and casually said, "You're a little devil and a mommy's boy." Yin Tianyu raised a brow unhappily. "I'm a mommy's boy. What's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with being a mommy's boy? If a son doesn't dote on his mommy, who will? Can you count on other men?" He seemed to be hinting at something by other men. Chapter 273. Yin Tianyu coldly retorted, "How can you be in pain? Don't you have a fiancé?" "Muyaja, let me tell you, mommy is a treasure in my heart. If you want to dote on my mommy, it must be legitimate. Or do you treat marriage as child's play? I don't know what mommy is thinking. However, I won't allow a relationship without a proper status." The little guy was still young, yet he knew that he needed a proper status. "Do you think that mommy is a woman you can toy with as you wish?" Yin Tianyu arrogantly crossed his arms, his eyes cold. "As long as I, Yin Tianyu, am around, no one can bully my mommy. You could try if you dare." There was no doubt in his threatening tone that he would not show mercy to those who bullied his mommy. The father-son pair's conversation was more like a negotiation, and had already reached a boiling point. Muyaja lightly said, "You said that you will protect your mommy. I don't doubt your ability. However, have you ever thought that when you grow up and get married and have children, your mommy will be all alone again? Can you bear to do that?" Yin Tianyu firmly said, "I won't get married and have children. I will accompany my mommy until she grows old. I will stay by her side and never leave her." The little lad's eyes were exceptionally resolute when he said those words. "Don't you wish to have a complete family?" Muyaja pinched his little hand and gently placed it in his palm. His lips curled into a smile. "A daddy, mommy, and an elder brother?" Yin Tianyu coldly withdrew his hand from the man's palm and slowly said, "A complete family isn't enough. If we don't love each other enough, being together will only be painful." Muyaja was stunned. He did not expect this child to know so much. "If my mommy falls in love with a man one day, perhaps I will respect her choice. However, the prerequisite is that this man must love my mommy enough. Although I can't interfere in matters of the heart, it doesn't mean that I can sit back and do nothing. I won't let anyone hurt her." Yu suddenly looked at him and took a step closer to him. She poked his chest with her little finger and asked coldly, "If that's the case, then let me ask you, do you like my mommy?" Her soft fingertips poked at his chest, but she didn't use much strength. Muyaja suddenly fell silent. In fact, even he himself did not know what kind of feelings he had for Yin Shishir. Like? What is like? In the world of love, he was like a blank piece of paper without any color. He didn't understand feelings, and he didn't know what love was. For as long as he could remember, he was like a marionette. It was only when Xiao Chen was born, and he looked at the baby's tender face in his swaddling clothes, that he vaguely understood his father's feelings for his son. Emotionally, he was clumsy. He doted on and spoiled Xiao Chen in every possible way. He wanted to give him the best in the world. Now, his heart ached for Yu, and he loved her to the core. The more he looked at the boy, the harder it was for him to control that distinct and unfamiliar feeling in his heart. Perhaps this was a father's love. This feeling of blood being thicker than water seemed to have seeped into his bones along with his blood. It was very clear. At the same time, he wanted to give him a warm family. In this family, there was a father, a mother, and an elder brother. He wanted to make up for the 6 years that this child had been missing. However, when this child poked his heart and questioned him, he was a little lost. Chapter 274. Did he like her? What did it mean to like her? If he had a strong possessiveness toward her, and this was considered as liking her, then he could answer that he liked her. However, he understood that possessiveness and desire did not mean that he liked her. Thus, he was momentarily at a loss regarding this question. Seeing his hesitation, Yu was displeased that he was still hesitating over this question. "You're hesitating for so long. I can tell that you don't like my mommy at all." Yu paused for a moment, his eyes revealing a hint of coldness. "Since you don't like her, then why are you still provoking my mommy? You have an older brother," Muyaja suddenly said. Yu was stunned for a long time before replying, "I know. Why did he suddenly mention that child? Yu Yu looked at him in confusion and did not speak again. At the mention of Xiao Yichen, a doting smile appeared on Muyaja's face. His name is Mu Yichen. He's as tall as you. When he stands next to you, even I can't tell who is you and who is him. Yes. Yu Yu's eyes suddenly became a little dazed. He knew that he had an older brother. In fact, he did not reject this older brother. It was just that he subconsciously resisted him. However, hearing Muyaja mention him, he was a little more curious about this older brother of his. Perhaps it's telepathy between brothers? He always mentions to me that he has a younger brother. Muyaja looked at him and smiled. At first, I thought that he was just a child's babble. Now I find it incredible. I can't help but marvel at the wonders of the Creator. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Tianyo's face was filled with disbelief. At the same time, his eyes could not help but become a little dazed. He dreams of me? Yes, Muyaja said lightly. I want to give him and you a complete family. Yu Yu, are you willing? His thin lips opened and closed as he gently called out her nickname. In an instant, it was as if there was some strange emotion piercing her heart. Caught off guard, an inexplicable feeling spontaneously arose in her heart. A complete home. A home where he had a father, a mother, and perhaps a brother who loved him dearly. In front of him, this man was gently asking for his opinion, asking if he was willing. Willing. His heart longed for it so eagerly. However, when he opened his mouth, he said with an awkward expression, I don't want to. The man's expression did not change. Obviously, he was not surprised by his answer. Not to mention letting a 6-year-old child accept his identity as a father. Even for himself, it took a lot of effort to digest the unexpected news that he had a 6-year-old son. Moreover, the child in front of him was extraordinarily intelligent and had his own opinions. From the conversation, the child's every word was to protect his mother. He did not give him a way out and pressed him step by step in order to test his feelings. Standing in front of him, he did not have the slightest bit of stage fright or fear of strangers. He was calm and decisive. When it came to his mother's happiness, there was no room for subtlety. His thoughts were also very clear between the lines, and his negotiation methods were also exactly the same as his. With just a few words, one could tell that he was a capable person despite his young age. From that sentence, Muyaja, let me tell you, Mommy is a treasure in my heart. If you want to dote on my mommy, it must be justified. To the child, the most important condition for his happiness was his mommy's happiness. Chapter 275. Yu Yu said coldly, It's not enough that you like me. My mommy has to like you as well. Muyaja's eyebrows twitched. He was a little impressed by this child's domineering and arrogant attitude. As expected of his son, his every movement was filled with the demeanor of an imperial lord. Yu Yu suddenly smiled. The elegant curve of his lips made him look like a polite little gentleman. Muyaja, you better be clear about one thing. Maybe in your mind, your love is a great gift to other women. But to my mommy, this is just the basics of true love. My mommy is beautiful, gentle, and considerate. Moreover, she has me, her son, to dote on her. If you want to be with my mommy, both of you must like each other. Do you understand? Huh? So you're saying that I still have a chance? Muyaja asked. Yu Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and snorted. Yes, it depends on your performance. Then now, Muyaja suddenly opened his palms and looked at his delicate and beautiful face gently. He asked softly, Can I hug you? His gentle and mellow male voice was filled with the love of a loving father. Yu Yu's heart suddenly stopped. His watery eyes widened slightly, and his heartbeat slowed down. Thump, thump. Seeing that he was hesitating, Muyaja nodded and waited for his response. Hug. Yu hesitantly stuck out the tip of his small tongue and moistened his dry lips. He looked at Muyaja's broad and warm chest with a faint desire in his eyes. No child could resist their father's warm hug. Little Yu Yu was the same. His eyes suddenly felt a little sour and astringent. In his heart, he was a little excited and yearning. When he was young, after kindergarten, he would see children his age running into their father's arms and being hugged by those strong arms. Those images always hurt his eyes. Mommy's hug was soft, but Mommy was too weak. When she hugged him, it was always a little uncomfortable. If he could be hugged by Daddy, it would be very blissful. Strong arms, warm chest, and strong heartbeat. Sitting on his shoulders, he felt as if he could touch the sky if he reached out. That feeling must be very blissful, right? With a little yearning, Yu could not help but reach out his hand. It was as if his entire body was enchanted with some kind of irresistible magic, and he yearned for his chest. Muyaja's eyes were warm as he held onto his little hand. Yu was Yu's hands. His hands were small hands should be soft and tender. Although her small hands were small, her 5 fingers were slender and smooth. Her fingernails were clean, and her joints were distinct. They were very beautiful, just like his hands. They were soft in his hands. With a gentle squeeze, he easily wrapped his hands in his palms. Muyaja realized that he liked this son of his very much. He was smart, sensible, considerate, and overly mature. One could not help but feel tender affection for him. Yu suddenly shrank back. His expression was a little awkward. Looking at him, his cheeks were red and a little hot. As if he was afraid that the man would misunderstand, he immediately emphasized his position. "I'm letting you hug me because of Mommy." Muyaja paused for a moment and smiled. "Okay." Chapter 276. But even if I let you hug me, it doesn't mean that I approve of you. It still depends on your performance. Although Little Munchkin said no, his face was getting redder and redder. He was obviously a little shy. He looked awkward, but deep down, he was yearning for this hug. Muyaja could tell that he was feeling awkward, but he pretended not to know. He only nodded and said, "Okay, just once, just this once," Yu repeated. When a man nodded again, he pursed his lips and took a step closer to the man nervously. One step at a time, and then another, until Muyaja's muscular arms reached under his armpits and hugged him firmly into his embrace. In an instant, Yu's face was burning hot. Muyaja scooped up the little lad, his left arm supporting his little but effortlessly. The child was too skinny. Was it because of malabsorption or malnutrition? Or was it because that stupid woman didn't nourish him properly? Children at this age were still growing, so they should eat more. Yet he was so skinny. This was the similarity between mother and son. But he didn't know that it wasn't that Yin Shir didn't pay attention to nutrition, but that Little Munchkin's body was naturally weak and couldn't absorb enough nutrients. No matter how much he ate, he didn't gain weight. Hugging the little lad, who was as light as a feather, the man lowered his head to look at him. Yu, on the other hand, lowered his head shyly and buried his face in the man's arms. He was afraid that the man would catch a glimpse of his blushing face. What was this feeling? An unfamiliar fatherly love. It was the fatherly love he used to yearn for. His strong arms seemed to be able to hold up the sky. His warm chest seemed to be able to melt the coldest snow in winter. Yu carefully placed his head on his chest. What responded to him was a strong heartbeat. The tip of his nose suddenly felt sour, and a faint blush appeared on it. Unknowingly, his thick eyelashes had become wet. So warm, thump, 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 it was like the sound of a drum. Somehow, listening to the strong heartbeat, he felt an inexplicable sense of security. Unknowingly, he fell asleep just like that. When Yin Shir returned with the bread and milk, Little Munchkin was already fast asleep in Muyaja's arms. When he opened the door, this was the scene that greeted him. She saw Muyaja sitting on the edge of the bed with Little Munchkin in his arms. Under the dim light, Little Munchkin's face was rosy and his long eyelashes covered his eyes as he slept soundly. Lee Hanlon, who was following behind him, also stopped in his tracks. He was afraid that he would wake up the little prince from his sleep. Muyaja heard the sound of footsteps and looked up to see that she had returned. He put a finger to his lips, indicating that she should be careful. Yin Shir understood and turned to Lee Hanlon with an apologetic smile. "Principal, thank you. Yu is asleep. It's late now. You should go back." "You're welcome." Lee Hanlon smiled and could not help taking another look at Yin Tianyu, who was sleeping soundly in the man's arms. "Oh, this little bun is cuter when he's asleep. He's more like a docile 6-year-old child." Sigh. Lee Hamlin sighed and said to Yin Sure, I won't stay any longer. I'll take my leave first. See you next time. Okay. Goodbye, Principal. She closed the door, and the ward regained its silence. Chapter 277. Yin Sure placed the items on the bedside table and sat down beside him. For a moment, both of them were silent. Initially, when she saw the man carrying the child with such a gentle expression, her heart fluttered. However, she couldn't help but feel worried. Would this man change his mind after seeing the child? Would he bring the child back to the Mu family? Although this man had tacitly agreed that she could keep the child by her side, he had never said that he would give up the child's custody. The wealthy had always placed great importance on passing down the family line. After all, this child was his flesh and blood. Even if he agreed, would the Mu family behind him agree to it? They probably wouldn't agree to it. Yin Sure couldn't help but feel vexed. She was not attentive enough. She should have protected the child well. Now that his identity had been exposed, she was in a very passive position. Muyaja carried little Munchkin quietly and lowered his head to look at the child's tender little face. His expression was focused, and he didn't know how much time had passed. Yin Sure was surprised. She was a little surprised. In her impression, this man had always been known to be domineering. When she first met him, he appeared in the dark room with a cold aura. His every move was indisputable, just like a high and mighty overlord who wouldn't allow anyone to resist or defy him. No matter how scared she was, the man didn't care about it at all. When they met again 6 years later, he was still as arrogant as ever. Yes, from the moment he was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Born as a crown prince, he lived a life of luxury and wealth. He was born arrogant and haughty. However, at this moment, the man in front of her was so quiet and even more patient than she had imagined. What surprised her even more was the way he carried the child. There wasn't a trace of awkwardness. Little you could sleep so soundly in his arms. Did he often carry Xiaoyi-Chen to sleep like this? He must be very experienced. However, with his status, he should have hired a group of servants to take care of the child, right? Or would he do it himself? After a long period of observation, the man suddenly raised his head and looked at her. When their eyes met, Yin Sure was slightly shocked and immediately retracted her gaze. There was another long silence. Yin Sure looked up at him, but saw that the man was still in the same position, as if his arm would never be sore. That was amazing. When she carried Yu for 2 hours, her arms could not take it anymore. They were sore and painful. Aren't you tired? Muyaja raised his eyebrows and shook his head. I'm not tired. How about I hold him for a while? Yin Sure said. Muyaja gazed at little Munchkin's face and said slowly, No need. I want to hold him for a while longer. Yin Sure mumbled. That's amazing. Don't your hands get sore? With a doting expression, Muyaja faintly said, Xiaoyi-Chen always had nightmares when he was young. Every time he woke up, I had to coax him to sleep. Yin Sure's heart skipped a beat. When he mentioned Xiaoyi-Chen, she felt as if there was a warm and sour feeling in her chest. Why do you always have nightmares? Muyaja frowned slightly, and there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. I dreamed that someone bullied his younger brother. Yin Sure was stunned. What is this dream? I don't know. Muyaja narrowed his eyes. Maybe it's the telepathy between the twins? Chapter 278. Just as he finished speaking, a series of footsteps suddenly came from outside the door and stopped at the door of the ward. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Yin Sure frowned and walked to the door to open it. Standing outside was her father, who looked weary and worried. She did not know why, but he seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. Startled, Yin Sure looked behind him and did not see Li Qin and the rest. Seeing her guarded look, he quickly said, There's no one else. I'm the only one here. Dad! Yin Sure looked at him with a complicated expression. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. Helplessness, heartache, guilt, and determination were written all over her face. He saw it all. He really owed this child too much. This time, he came here to sort things out. Sure. I'm here to see you. I also want to talk to you about something. Yin Sure's lips curled up. Dad, Yu is fine. The doctor said that he's fine now. It's probably an old illness, so he's asleep now. Yun Yeching sighed and said slowly, "Don't worry. I'll just take a look. I'll leave after that." Yin Shishir nodded and opened the door slightly. Yun Yeching walked in and, as if he did not see Mu Yaja standing at the side, walked straight to the bed. At this moment, Yu had been carefully carried to the bed by Mu Yaja. He was covered with a blanket, looking peaceful and docile. Yun Yeching sat by the bed and looked at his weak appearance. He wanted to reach out to comfort him, but halfway through, he retracted his hand in annoyance. His face crumbled and was full of pain. "I'm not worthy of him calling me Grandpa. Dad." He suddenly stood up and walked to the balcony. He waved at Yin Shishir and called her over for a talk. Yin Shishir immediately went to the balcony and closed the door. The father-daughter pair looked at each other for a long time. After a long silence, Yun Yeching suddenly burst into tears. "You've suffered all these years. It's father's fault for not being able to protect you and letting you suffer so much." As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Shishir's eyes immediately turned red. No one could understand the complicated feelings in her heart at this moment. All these years, Yin Yeching had always treated her like his own daughter. Even though Li Qin and Yuna had never accepted her, at least he had fulfilled his responsibility as a father when it came to her food and clothing, no matter how big or small, at least. They were not related by blood. More than a decade ago, Yin Yeching had become infertile due to his illness. Li Qin had always wanted a son, so the two went to the orphanage to adopt a boy. At that time, when he first met her, it was in a dormitory. Yin Yeching stood by the window and looked at Yin Shishir, who was only 9 years old at that time. She hugged her body and curled up in the corner of the room, trembling. Her eyes were lifeless and her face was ashen. Taking a closer look at her body, it was covered with wounds. His face was green and purple, and his mental state was very poor. For some reason, Yin Yeching felt a throbbing pain in his heart. This child, be it her facial features or temperament, was very beautiful and pleasant. She looked like a very obedient child with beautiful eyes. However, for some reason, she was the only one in the empty dormitory, hugging her knees and trembling in fear while the other children were playing outside. She must have been bullied by many children, right? Chapter 279. The teacher behind her looked embarrassed. Back then, Yin Yeching had a successful career and had some prestige in the area. The teacher kindly reminded him, "Mr. Yun, have you taken a liking to this child? None of the teachers or children in the orphanage likes her. She seems to be a little autistic and has some mental issues. She doesn't like to talk and always has a gloomy face. She looks unlucky. Besides, she stole from another girl before, so the children ostracize her." "Stole?" Li Qin frowned and immediately said, "She can't steal. How could she have such a bad habit?" "Yeching, don't waste time. Let's go see the other children. Don't talk." Yin Yeching stopped her and said to the teacher in dissatisfaction, "Man is born kind. The child is so young and hasn't formed a good sense of honor and disgrace. Even if she made a mistake, as a teacher, shouldn't you guide her on the right path? Look at her. She's been bullied to this extent. You say that she has some mental issues. How could she not have any? The children around her are bullying her, and the teachers don't care. What can a child like her do?" The teacher was embarrassed by his righteous words and then led Yun Shishir out. Standing in front of Yin Yeching and looking at the man's incomparably kind face, Yin Shishir was so scared that she shrank into a corner with her lips trembling. "I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief. Don't arrest me." Yin Yeching did not know why, but his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Even though he knew very well that he was not related to this child by blood, his heart ached so much that he almost could not breathe when he saw her fragile state. Hence, despite Li Qin's repeated objections, he still decided to adopt her. Thinking back, Yin Shishir was still grateful to him. If not for Yin Yeching's redemption and giving her a second life, she did not even know what would have happened to her during that dark childhood. No matter how Li Qin and Yuna treated her, she had always been grateful to Yin Yeching. He was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "I've decided to divorce her. We'll go and get the divorce done tomorrow." The her he was referring to was naturally Li Qin. Yin Shishir was surprised to hear that. Divorce? Was her father going to divorce Li Qin? Yin Shishir tried to talk him out of it, while her husband only looked at her quietly. After a while, she decided to tell him what was on her mind. Dad, I support your decision. It's wise to divorce her. I know. When it comes to marriage, we can only persuade them to reconcile, not to divorce. But Li Qin is too greedy. You'll only be a burden if you stay with her. Dad, why do you have to tire yourself out? It doesn't matter if I'm tired or not. I'm already so old. For a man of his age, he would make do if he could. Half of his body was already in the soil. If he were to get a divorce at this time, it would be unpleasant for anyone to hear about it. It was inevitable that people would gossip about it. But in the end, he couldn't bear to implicate his daughter. You, on the other hand, I feel the most guilty towards you. I even found out that she was the one who forced you to do what you did 6 years ago. I'm such a bastard. As he spoke, he stomped his feet and slapped himself hard. Chapter 280. He replied slowly, It's all in the past, but I can't forgive her or let her go. As he spoke, he took out a handkerchief from his chest pocket. Inside it was a well-wrapped bank card. He looked at her. There's more than 5 million yuan in here. 5 million yuan? Yes, he continued. This is the additional remuneration that your previous employer gave you. This was a check for 5 million yuan given to him by Mu Yaja's assistant. He did not touch a single cent and deposited it all into this card. Later on, the money he earned from his part-time job was also deposited into this card. Although it was not much, it was still a token of his sincerity. He saved this money for Yun Shishir's dowry when she got married in the future. He was already old and did not have much capability. He was no longer as spirited as he was when he was young. His monthly salary was about 3,000 yuan. After deducting all his living expenses, he had not touched a single cent in the card for the past few years. He had always kept this card with him. Even Li Qin did not know that there was so much money in it. This was to prevent her from getting greedy when she found out. Even Yin Shishir thought that this sum of money had been used to repay debts back then. When Yun Yeqing came looking for Yun Shishir after Yun Na's accident, he wanted to find an opportunity to discuss this matter with her. He thought that with his daughter's accident, he had no choice but to ask Yun Shishir to withdraw tens of thousands of yuan from the card for urgent needs. He thought that she would agree to it given her gentle and considerate personality. Who knew that he would suddenly find out the truth of what happened 6 years ago? His world had been turned upside down, and he could not accept it for a while. Now that he had made up his mind to divorce Li Qin, this card should be returned to its rightful owner. Although the property prices in the capital are rising day by day, the money in this card is enough to buy a decent house. Although I've divorced that woman, we're still father and daughter. If you're free in the future, you can bring you home to have a meal with me. That's enough. Dad, this money, Yun Yeqing said, this is your money. I didn't tell you earlier because I was afraid that woman would remember it. Daddy was keeping it for you, and now I'm returning it to its rightful owner. With Yu around, you must be living a tight life. Now that Yu is hospitalized, it was time to spend money. This sum of money should be able to solve the problem. Thank you, Dad. Yin Shishir took the bank card and smiled. Dad, you divorced her, but you also said that our father-daughter relationship is still there. You should live with us. I'll take care of you and Yu. Yin Yeqing hesitated. That's not good. It's not like you don't know that woman's character. Greedy for glory and splendor, he had always been used to being extravagant. If I were to stay with you, she would definitely come over and make a fuss again. I'm afraid that you and Yu wouldn't be safe. Now that you're successful, you can't let her drag you down. Yin Yeqing spoke with sincerity. He was truly thinking of the mother-son pair. After all, given Li Qin's character, she would definitely not let the matter rest. Yin Yeqing used that woman to refer to Li Qin. It was clear that he was extremely tired of this failed marriage. Chapter 281. Yin Shishir replied, What's there to be afraid of, Dad? As long as you don't let yourself be blinded by them and see their true colors, I'll be at ease. I'll take care of you in the future. Do you want me to watch you grow old and have no one to depend on? You've raised me since I was young. I'll definitely repay this favor. Repay? It was clear that he owed her so much. Yun Yeching was both vexed and touched. His lips trembled as he nodded repeatedly. Although Yun Shishir was not his biological daughter, she was more filial than a biological daughter. Although he had given birth to a good-for-nothing ingrate, he was relieved to have such a considerate daughter like Yun Shishir. This time, he did not reject her and only said, "Let's talk about it some other time. If I divorce her, she'll definitely not take it lying down. When the time comes, she'll make a fuss about splitting the family assets. You'll definitely be implicated." "Splitting the family assets?" Yun Shishir said angrily. "Do you still want to split the family assets with that kind of woman? I won't share it with her. Fortunately, I didn't do anything stupid back then. When I bought this house, I registered it under your name. Even if we get divorced, she can forget about getting any benefits. This is an evil creature she created, so she should bear the consequences herself. I, Yun Yeching, have never mistreated her. Even if we get divorced, my conscience will be clear. It's been hard on you." Yun Shishir was a little stunned. That small 3-bedroom apartment was a second-hand house he bought back then, yet it was registered under her name? When the father-daughter pair walked out of the balcony, they saw that the ward was filled with nurses. Yun Yeching was stunned when he saw the handsome man standing by the bed. He seemed to have seen him before. At her father's question, Yun Shishir sized up Muyaja and said guiltily, He, this is my university professor. His surname is Mu. He's so young." Yun Yeching was a little speechless. The man in front of him clearly looked to be in his late 20s. He was handsome and looked very young. The man raised his head. His perfect and exquisite facial features and handsome face made him look like a high and mighty noble. Just one look from him was enough to make one feel intimidated. He was clearly so young, but he looked extremely mature and reserved. His every movement had an extraordinary bearing. In front of him, it made others feel ashamed of their inferiority. Even Yun Yeching could not help feeling uneasy. "So, you're Shishir's university professor. Nice to meet you. You look so young." Muyaja also cooperated and nodded, but did not say anything. His attitude was very cold. What's going on?" Yun Shishir was surprised to see that the ward was full of nurses. "Change wards," Muyaja said succinctly. Only then did Yun Shishir recall that the director had previously mentioned that he wanted to change their ward to a special class ward. But why were there so many nurses gathered here? She saw those nurses crowding around the ward's entrance. Their eyes were either stunned or filled with admiration as they sized up Muyaja. Initially, when the inpatient department director informed the young patient in this ward that he wanted to change to a special ward, a few nurses rushed over with the bed. However, as soon as they entered the ward, they saw this handsome man sitting in front of the bed, gently caressing the child's sleeping face. That perfect, godlike side glance instantly killed everyone. Gosh, the family member of a patient in Ward 702 is so handsome. How handsome is he? Chapter 282. For a moment, many nurses, who had nothing to do, gathered in the ward. The moment they saw Muyaja, everyone's eyes widened. "Oh God, he's so handsome and tall. He should be 9 meters tall. He's a whole shoulder taller than me. Oh God, I wonder if he has a girlfriend? Is this child his son? He looks so much like him." Hence, the nurse's eyes darted back and forth between Muyaja and Yun Tianyu. Some were suspicious, some were shocked, some were disappointed, and some were desolate. Is he already married? Oh God, this child should be 6 years old. Sigh, it's hopeless. A group of people whispered among themselves. Although their voices were not loud, they still disturbed the little lad, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. Yu Yu's brows furrowed slightly. Smacking his lips, he seemed to be really disturbed and kicked the blanket in dissatisfaction. Seeing that he was disturbed, Muyaja's face instantly turned frosty. Seeing this, Yun Shishir's heart ached a little. She walked over to the nurses and said, "I'm sorry. Please keep your voices down. Don't crowd around the ward door, lest you wake the child." Seeing Yun Shishir blocking her way, an intern nurse pushed her to the side in dissatisfaction. "Io, it's almost dawn now. The nurse on duty will be here soon to take his blood pressure. Besides, Aren't you guys changing wards? Isn't it good that he's awake now? That's right. Some parents these days spoil their children too much. Yun Shirshir's face was tainted with a hint of anger. Is this your work attitude? What do you mean? The intern nurse, who must have just graduated, retorted without knowing the gravity of the situation. Someone at the side immediately tugged at her sleeve. That's enough. Let's not talk about it anymore. We were a little loud just now. Are you that child's mother? The intern nurse suddenly gossiped. What's your relationship with this gentleman? I just heard from this woman that this man is her university professor. I heard on the news that a university professor is keeping a student as his mistress. Someone speculated in a low voice. Could it be that this child is their private? Is that enough? Yun Shirshir flew into a rage out of humiliation. Do I need you to inquire about our relationship? As soon as her voice fell, she saw their eyes widen in horror as they looked behind her. Yun Shirshir turned around belatedly, only to see Mu Yaja standing behind her. He impatiently swept his gaze over the crowd surrounding the door, his voice as cold as ice. Scram! There was a hint of sharpness in his tone. With just one word, the crowd instantly dispersed. Clean and direct. The ward instantly became much quieter. Yun Shirshir sighed and was a little speechless. The procedures to transfer to another ward were completed very quickly. Not long after, the department director led 2 nurses to push a bed into the room and carried the little lad onto it. Yun Yeching supported the bed and left with the department director. Before he left, he reminded Shirshir, "It's already morning. Professor Mu, thank you very much for coming to visit you. You haven't rested for the whole night, so let Shirshir send you downstairs." Mu Yaja exchanged glances with him, his eyes slightly cold. Yun Yeching was intimidated by his gaze. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he hurriedly left. Chapter 283. Yun Shirshir told him that this man was her university professor. He was not a 3-year-old child, even though he had complimented him on the surface. It was clear that Shirshir was deliberately hiding this from him, even though he was unsure of this man's identity. When he compared the father and the son's appearance, he immediately returned to his senses. Thus, he could roughly guess this man's identity. He should be that mysterious employer from 6 years ago. He did not point it out as he was afraid that Shirshir would be embarrassed. Yun Yeching escorted Yun Tianyo's bed and left. The ICU was on the 15th floor. Before he left, he did not forget to remind Shirshir to go back to rest and come back to the hospital to replace him. Yun Shirshir thought for a moment and nodded. She could go back to get some of Yu's clothes to change into. At the elevator entrance, Yun Shirshir said, "Mu Yaja, it's getting late. You should go back." Mu Yaja's expression was tinged with anger as he cocked a brow. "Are you chasing me away? I saw that you didn't sleep last night, so I'm afraid that you're tired." Mu Yaja's expression softened instantly, and a hint of mockery flashed in his eyes. "Oh, so you're feeling sorry for me? Think whatever you want." Yun Shirshir was a little annoyed as she said angrily, "Don't blame me when you don't have the energy to work." Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile. With one hand in his pocket, he leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, "I've always been energetic. Haven't you experienced it yourself?" His words were clearly hinting at something. Yun Shirshir bit her lower lip as her cheeks flushed red all the way to her ears. She glared at him in embarrassment and annoyance. "Ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking about." Ding! The elevator door opened. Yun Shirshir was about to step into the elevator when she was pushed into a corner and slammed into the cold wall. She could not help but widen her eyes in shock. Before she could react, the man's tall body was already pressing against her. It was a camera's blind spot. He had an ulterior motive. The elevator door closed. At this moment, only the 2 of them were left in the narrow space. Yun Shirshir was shocked and looked up at him in fear. Mu Yaja lowered his head and reached out to hold her chin tightly. His long and narrow eyes curled up devilishly. His eyes were deep and heavy. He let out an evil laugh and leaned closer to her face. Staring into her helpless eyes, he said in a low and hoarse voice, "Little liar, you're really interesting. What are you doing?" Yun Shirshir turned her face away in a panic, but he pulled her face back and forced her to meet his gaze. "Ha, you usually look so obedient, but I didn't expect you to be so clever when it comes to lying." She was startled, and her face flushed red unnaturally. She had no choice but to lie. How could he tell the truth in front of his father? Could it be that he had to confess to his father? This was undoubtedly tearing open his scab scar. Yin Yeqing had always been brooding over the contract from 6 years ago. He was annoyed at himself for not being capable enough to let his most beloved daughter become a surrogate. If she were to say this, her father would definitely be in a tight spot without a doubt. He, on the other hand, had followed her into the hospital and caught her off guard. Now he was blaming her? Yin Shishir averted her eyes and did not look at him. She pursed her lips as if she were sulking, but in the man's eyes, she looked a little childish and adorable. "Professor? Huh. Chapter 284. Little thing, why don't you tell me what I've taught you?" As he said that, he reached out and rubbed her chest heavily. He lowered his head and bit her lips, the tip of his tongue rubbing against her lips as he smiled devilishly. "Is it this?" He didn't teach her anything good, but he did teach her a lot of things that she shouldn't have learned. Yin Shishir exclaimed and slapped his hand away forcefully. Her eyes were filled with anger. "You? What are you doing?" This was an elevator. It could stop at any time, and people could come in. How could he be so brazen in the elevator? Didn't he know how to restrain himself? As she thought about it, Yin Shishir felt ashamed and indignant. Her phone rang at the right time. She heaved a sigh of relief and hoped that the man would pick up the phone so that she could escape this disaster. However, Muyaja didn't seem to have any intention of letting her off. He even ignored the loud ringtone and took a step closer to her. His slender fingers brushed her face gently as he narrowed his eyes and carefully studied her face. Suddenly, he sighed softly. What a seductive face! Look at those innocent and pure eyes with a hint of coquettishness. One look was enough to seduce one's soul. Muyaja lowered his head and lightly pecked the corner of her lips with an ambiguous smile. "Has anyone ever told you that you look like a vixen?" Yin Shishir turned her head away, ignoring the man's provocation. He suddenly lowered his head and 2 warm breasts covered her. His large palm rubbed her waist unceremoniously and pinched it hard, causing her to groan in pain. Her lips and teeth were filled with his mellow scent, and there seemed to be a strong smell of smoke. His hot lips and tongue stole her breath and entered the gap between her lips. He gently nibbled on her small tongue and greedily sucked on it. She dodged uneasily and looked at the slightly darkened eyes. She raised her head and looked at the jumping 4 numbers. She angrily pushed him away. This man, how dare he mess around in the elevator? They were about to reach the 1st floor. What if someone saw them? As he thought of this, his hand had unknowingly circled around her back, brushing past the scorching heat of his body as it probed into her skirt. Yin Shishir was so shocked that her beautiful face turned pale. She couldn't help but start to struggle. Her hands patted his shoulders, but she still couldn't stop his aggressive actions. She steeled her heart and fiercely bit his tongue. Amidst the dull pain, the 2 lips parted. Yin Shishir wiped her lips and glared at him. "Muyaja, don't go too far. When he hugged you just now," the tender look on his face made her heart throb a little, and her impression of him changed. Who would have thought that at this moment, he would reveal his true colors? Muyaja's face froze for a second. Then, he raised his eyebrows dangerously, and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. This woman actually bit him again? It was somewhat inconceivable, but more than that, he found it interesting. The girl in front of him, who clearly looked weak and fragile, was resisting him again and again. It seemed that no matter how docile a cat was, once it started to scratch, it would be quite fierce. One had to know that with his status and identity, many women would flock to him like a flock of ducks. They would even lower themselves to cater to him. However, this woman was extremely unwilling, and it ignited his desire to conquer her. Well, it was good that he spent more effort to train her. What he really enjoyed was the process of conquering. Chapter 285. The man's eyes were too scary. She simply lowered her head and stopped looking at him. In this suffocating panic, the elevator door slowly opened with a ding sound. Yun Shirshir lifted her head as if she had been granted amnesty, but when she saw the woman standing outside the elevator, her heart plummeted. Her breath caught in her throat as she subconsciously pushed the man away and awkwardly tugged at the corner of her lips. Auntie, Yin Shirshir was a little embarrassed. Her heart was in a mess. She didn't know how much she had seen in the elevator just now. She nervously intertwined her fingers and walked out of the elevator uneasily. She subconsciously looked at Muyaja. Unexpectedly, the man evilly wiped his lips and looked at her deeply. He whispered in her ear, "I'll wait for you outside." Then, he turned around and took out his phone to see the missed calls displayed on the screen. He then walked away. Yin Shirshir was stunned. This man actually left just like that, leaving a mess for her to deal with. Yin Shirshir was hesitating about what excuse to make up when she saw Yun Lingru looking at Mu Yaja in surprise. Yun Lingru said in surprise, Shirshir, what were you doing just now? Of course, she didn't see wrong. The moment the elevator door opened, her niece, who had always been well-behaved, was intimately close to that man. Boyfriend? That man just now was obviously a business elite who had stepped into society. She suddenly felt a little strange in her heart, and secretly wondered what kind of ambiguous relationship they were having. Yin Shirshir was stunned. For a moment, she didn't know how to explain. Her face flushed red, and her head hung low. Yin Lingru saw her guilty look and became even more suspicious. Shirshir, don't tell me you're dating someone? No. Yin Shirshir denied it immediately. Yin Lingru pressed on. Then who is that man? What were you doing in the elevator just now? Yin Shirshir bit her lip and stuttered as she tried to explain. However, she couldn't tell the truth. Pursing her lips, she said, he's my university professor. University professor? A professor hugging his student in an elevator? Yin Lingru was even more confused. She stared straight at her. There was no doubt that the child in front of her was lying. Yin Shirshir had been obedient since she was a child, so she wasn't good at lying. Yin Lingru could tell that she was lying from her flustered eyes. Shirshir, I didn't expect you to learn how to lie after entering society. English teacher, you can lie to your father, but you can lie to me. Is he really your university professor? Don't lie to me. Faced with Yun Lingru's aggression, Yin Shirshir could not back down. She gritted her teeth and insisted. He is my university professor. He came to the hospital to visit Yu today. Are you still not going to tell me the truth? Yin Lingru's voice was very deep. She seemed to be angry. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked coldly, I heard from your father that you haven't been home for a few days. Where have you been these few days? She paused and asked suspiciously, Did you fool around with that man? Sure. Tell me, did you learn something bad and do something shameful? Chapter 286. Auntie, I have something to do now, so I'll leave first. I'll explain it to you next time. With that, she turned around and fled in a panic. Yin Lingru narrowed her eyes and frowned, her gaze sharp. This girl's words sounded suspicious no matter how she listened to them. However, she wasn't her child, so even if she did something out of line, she wouldn't mind. As long as she didn't bring shame to her family, it would be fine. She couldn't afford to lose face. With that thought, she stepped into the lift. Even after running out of the hospital, Yin Shirshir's heart still palpitated with fear. It was all because of this vile man who fooled around in the lift. Now that her Annie had seen it, she really didn't know how to smooth things over. A business car was parked by the roadside. The man sat in the car and seemed to have been waiting for a long time. He had already ordered his assistant to drive the sports car back. Yin Shirshir walked over gloomily. The chauffeur opened the car door for her, but she didn't get into the car. Muyaja sat elegantly in the back seat with his legs crossed lazily. His eyes were looking straight ahead, and he didn't turn a look at her. His perfect and unruly side profile looked reserved and cold. His eyes were half opened lazily, and his lips were cold. Many times he was like an arrogant emperor, exuding an aura that made people subconsciously submit to him. Yin Shirshir was a little angry with him. How could this man do as he pleased? Did he not care about the occasion when he was in heat? Sperm rushing to the brain. With that thought, she couldn't help but blurt out what was in her mind. Just as she finished speaking, she reacted and bit her lip. She actually said it out loud. Muyaja glanced at her, and his lips curled up playfully. What did you say? What did she say? She said that he was a sperm rushing to the brain, but she didn't dare to say a second time. She sighed, bit her lip, and got into the carriage. Bang! The car door was shut tight. Yin Sure looked straight ahead and didn't dare to get too close to him. She leaned against the car door and looked at him carefully out of the corner of her eye. After a long silence, she suddenly said softly, "Please send me home. I'll get some clothes for you." As soon as her voice fell, her arm was forcefully pulled by the man. Muyaja's long arm scooped her up and easily pulled her into his embrace. Yin Sure was startled. She struggled for a moment, and in the blink of an eye, she was already pulled into his embrace. In the spacious carriage, soft music drifted in the air. The man's eyes revealed a playful smile. He lifted his thin lips and said in a low and seductive voice, "Little thing, you haven't answered me. What did you just say?" In other words, there was no way for her to change the topic and dodge the question. Yin Sure closed her eyes and ignored her. Muyaja had plenty of ways to make her talk. Did you just say that he was overwhelmed by lust? Through her shirt, he pinched the softness in front of her chest. Like this. Yin Sure's body trembled slightly, and her face instantly tensed up. Instinctively, she turned her head to look at the chauffeur, only to see that he had consciously turned away from the rearview mirror, as though he had turned a deaf ear to the scene in the back seat. A sense of foreboding arose in her heart. Yin Sure struggled uneasily, but the man held her waist tightly. His large palm pressed against her back and pressed her even closer to his chest. Their faces were intimately close, the tips of their noses touching, and their lips touching. Chapter 287. Such a close distance really made her feel uncomfortable. Looking at the devilishly handsome face so close, Yin Sure helplessly pushed against his chest. Wasn't this man just sitting there quietly? Why did he suddenly? There was someone else in the car. She looked away helplessly, but her chin was tightly gripped by his long fingers, and she was forced to look at his face. Her eyes were narrowed in pain, and they were faintly moist. Her soft red lips were sparkling and translucent, just like a delicious cherry. He fiercely captured her lips and sucked on them. That soft and sweet feeling was even better than what he had imagined. Once he kissed her, he couldn't stop. His body heated up, and he greedily wanted more. He gently traced her cherry lips, and his right hand reached under her clothes, reaching for the beautiful area. He was in high spirits, and he continued what he was doing in the lift. "That's enough. Muyaja." "Not enough." "You." Yin Sure flew into a rage out of humiliation. She struggled, and her body couldn't help but tremble. Her fair cheeks flushed red shyly, and she looked even more alluring. Muyaja looked at this pleasing scene. He had really misjudged this girl, and he had once compared her to a cat. Now that he thought about it, she was actually a beautiful and flirtatious poppy flower. One couldn't help but sink deeper and deeper and become addicted to it. Yin Sure was quite shocked by this sudden action. They were still in the car, and the chauffeur was still sitting in front. This man actually did such a thing in front of others. She was a little helpless, but more than that, she felt ashamed. She pushed his chest hard, but her weak strength was not worth mentioning to Muyaja. He only used one hand to bind her wrists. "Let go. Let go of me." She panted softly and glared at him in annoyance. The man was unmoved. He pressed his lips tightly against hers, and he raised his eyebrows. "Isn't this what you want from me?" Yin Sure sneered and glanced at him. "What are you talking about? It's so weird." Muyaja's eyes flashed with ridicule. "You're tempting me. Don't you want me to do this?" His tone was devilish. The orchid's breath curled around her neck. He had always been a man who did things his own way. He never liked to restrict himself or suppress himself. However, he didn't really want to do her. With his strong possessiveness, how could he allow his woman to be coveted by other men? However, he felt that this woman's angry look was a little cute and charming. He liked to admire her posture. It was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, he had the intention to tease her. However, Yin Shishir really thought that this man was going to do her in the car. If Yin Shishir glanced at the chauffeur behind her from the corner of her eye. This man is too pretentious. Seeing that his actions were becoming more and more insatiable, and that his large palm was actually reaching into her clothes, she flew into a rage out of humiliation. Gritting her teeth, she raised her hand. Slap! A crisp sound rang out. The man couldn't help but turn his face sideways. She pushed him away and sat back in her seat. Her face was full of anger. Muyaja's gaze froze, and he was in disbelief. Even the driver, who was sitting in the driver's seat, was stunned. He held his breath. He had seen a lot of stubborn women, but this was the first woman who dared to hit the CEO. So powerful, the driver was in awe of her. Yin Shishir's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She said unhappily, "I asked you to stop. Didn't you hear me clearly?" Chapter 288. Yin Shishir was not the least bit intimidated by his deterrence. She met his gaze and coldly said, "Chairman Mu, I'll have to trouble you to size up the situation. Unless you're a beast, even if you're in heat, you should pick a place, okay? You may not be embarrassed, but I am." Puffed. This woman actually compared the president to a beast in heat. Actually, it was no wonder. After all, the president had been suppressing himself for a long time. He did not have a woman by his side, and his so-called fiancée was just a facade. He had been suppressing himself for a long time. The chauffeur could not help but laugh. However, when he caught a glimpse of the man's dangerous gaze through the rearview mirror, he was so frightened that he immediately shut up. Muyaja raised his eyebrows, and there was a murderous look in his eyes. "Did you say I'm a beast?" I said. "Is there something wrong with your understanding?" Yin Shishir asked mockingly. "Did I say you're a beast? What I said just now was that only beasts choose a time and place to be in heat. I wasn't referring to you in particular." Muyaja was taken aback by her words. Yin Shishir's words were impeccable, and he was speechless. This woman was really sharp-tongued. She did not say anything on the surface, but she insinuated that he was a beast. Even if he wanted to refute, there was nothing he could do. "Chairman Mu, you're from a noble family. You must have received higher education. Don't you know the basic respect for others?" Yin Shishir said angrily. "If you don't know, why don't I teach you another lesson?" The man raised his eyebrows unhappily. "Are you educating me?" The chauffeur could not help but laugh when he heard that. Muyaja could not take it anymore. He had nowhere to vent his anger after being snubbed by someone. "Old Han." "Yes, President. Why are you laughing?" "Which bastard is laughing?" Old Han looked embarrassed. "Am I laughing?" "I'm not laughing. Just now you—" Muyaja's voice was serene with hidden displeasure. "President, I was in a daze just now. I didn't see or hear anything." Old Han was a smart man and immediately defended himself. "Get lost," Muyaja said coldly. Old Han wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and quickly turned off the engine. At the same time, he raised the partition in the car to separate the driver's seat from the back seat. The car was closed, and the back seat was an enclosed space, isolated from the rest of the world. "What are you doing?" Yin Shishir watched as the chauffeur alighted from the car. From the corner of her eye, she could see the man's gloomy and terrifying expression. She pursed her lips and felt a little scared. Just now, she couldn't help but stretch out her hand and slap him. Now, she was filled with regret. It seemed that she had angered him. She turned to open the car door, but the car was already locked. Without the central control to unlock it, the car door could not be opened. Behind her, Muyaja pulled her into his embrace with his long arms and asked coldly, "Are you satisfied now?" Now, we're the only ones in the car. There are no outsiders. Yin Shishir's heart skipped a beat. She said angrily, "Are you a beast?" "You're right. I'm a beast." Muyaja inched closer to her and sniffed the shower gel on her neck. It was the same scent as his. He felt as if he was poisoned. He was poisoned by this woman, and there was no antidote. It was not enough. It was not enough. He had never desired a woman so much. It was like he was poisoned. No one could cure him. Seeing the man getting closer, Yin Shishir's body tensed up. She pushed his chest and said angrily, "No, I don't like it in the car." Chapter 289. Enough. before she could finish her sentence, her phone started ringing again as if it was her last resort. Mu Yaja frowned unhappily and picked up the phone. Yin Shishir glanced at it curiously. The name Mu Wanru was like a needle pricking her eyes. Her heart felt strangely congested. Mu Wanru was this man's fiancée. Just as she was feeling embarrassed and annoyed, she suddenly realized what was going on. Could it be that they didn't have a good relationship? She had never seen a couple in love leave a full name in their contact information on their phones. It was cold and indifferent. There wasn't even a pet name. Those 3 words were cold and emotionless, as if there was no emotion behind them. On second thought, she raised her eyebrows. Simple and clear. That was this man's usual style. Maybe they had a good relationship. Why should she worry about it? But as he thought of this, a sense of shame arose in his heart. She felt that she was a third party. Yin Shishir suddenly felt very uncomfortable. She wanted to defend herself, but she couldn't. Wasn't that right? What was the difference between her and those women who interfered in other people's marriages? Mu Wanru, was she the woman she bumped into the other time? Yin Shishir's gaze deepened. She felt that something was wrong. She didn't know why, but this woman gave her a sense of déjà vu. Her eyes were so familiar. In her dusty memory, it was as if an indelible mark had been engraved. Somehow, it was as if some memory was breaking out of its cocoon. Her head hurt. Muyaja hung up the phone and didn't pick it up. From the corner of his eye, he saw that she was deep in thought. His handsome eyes deepened. Rose Manor. In front of the bright floor-to-ceiling windows, Mu Wanru was in her pajamas. She held her phone tightly. Her expression was distorted due to anger. He wasn't picking up the phone. 3 consecutive calls were cut off. What was going on? She turned around and walked to the dining table. There was a thick stack of newspapers on the table. The headlines of the newspapers were all about Tang Yu having an affair with Huan Yu's top management. The pictures and text were very eye-catching. Mu Wanru picked up one of them and skimmed through it. Looking at the dazzling title, her knuckles stiffened. Alan, you useless piece of trash. He didn't do his job well, and even messed up a small task that was given to him. She trusted him so much, but he couldn't even do such a simple thing. She had thought that she could sit back and wait for Yin Shishir's scandal to be exposed, but now she had fallen into an irrecoverable situation. At that time, even Huan Yu would not be able to protect her, let alone Lin Fengtian. For a female celebrity, it was a huge scandal to be exposed. She would definitely be banned from the industry. Who knew that the person who was exposed the next day would be Tang Yu? This was strange. Why Tang Yu? Alan assured her again and again that the whole thing had been arranged properly. His subordinates had personally sent Yin Shishir to the car. How did things turn out like this in the end? Could it be that Yin Shishir could turn into a living person? This was simply a fantasy. Mu Wanru was angry and frustrated. At the same time, she found it inconceivable. She had an ominous premonition that there was something fishy going on. The servants served breakfast to the table one after another. Mu Sheng slowly walked down the stairs with the help of the nanny. Mu Wanru immediately crushed the newspapers and threw them into the trash can. She went up to him with a smile and took the old man from the nanny. Carefully supporting him, she said sweetly, "Grandpa, good morning." Chapter 290. Mu Wanru helped him sit at the table. Grandpa Mu sat up straight, lifted his chin, and scanned the dining room. Suddenly, he asked, "That lad didn't come home last night?" At the mention of this, Mu Wanru looked worried. She said helplessly, "Yes, he didn't come back. I don't know where he went. Maybe he's busy at the office." "The office works at night?" Grandpa Mu sneered, expressing his displeasure. "I think that lad's wings have hardened and his heart has become wild. He doesn't even know how to return home. Wanru, you should discipline him." "Grandpa, how can I discipline him?" Mu Wanru pouted and acted coquettishly. She sat down on the chair beside Mu Sheng and said sadly, "Grandpa, he doesn't listen to my advice at all. Ever since he was young, he didn't listen to anyone other than you. I asked him to come home earlier, but he didn't come back last night. This isn't the first time. He wasn't like this in the past, though." Mu Sheng nodded in agreement. This child had always been cold and indifferent. He would never get into trouble outside. He was different from other playboys who liked to flirt with countless women. This child would never mess around. This was something he had always acknowledged. In Grandpa Mu's heart, Mu Yaja was a responsible father. He would come home every night to have dinner with Xiao Chen. No matter how busy he was with work, he would never miss it. However, his abnormality these few days made Grandpa Mu especially concerned. Seeing his slightly darkened expression, Mu Wanru continued to whisper in his ear, "Grandpa, he's a man. Do you think he has other women outside? He dares." Grandpa Mu was so angry when he heard this that he blew his beard and glared at her. He slammed his palm on the table, causing some of the tea to splash out. The servants behind him were so shocked that they did not dare to breathe loudly. Mu Wanru was elated to see this. Mu Sheng had always been on her side. This time, he must stand up for her. "Last, don't worry. If he's unfaithful to you and messes around outside, Grandpa will definitely stand up for you and break his legs." Grandpa Mu looked at her lovingly. When he got angry, the cane in his hand hit the ground heavily. Mu Wanru pursed her lips and looked at him pitifully. "Grandpa, don't be sad. I won't let him down." With that, he patted the back of her hand affectionately. "Rower, don't worry." Seeing that Grandpa Mu was going to stand up for her, she was even happier. So, she pretended to be distressed and said, "Grandpa, don't do that. If you break his leg, my heart will ache, and so will Grandpa." "Oomph, you spoil him the most. If you don't take care of a man and set some rules for him, his heart will be wild sooner or later." Mu Sheng was quite knowledgeable about this. When he was young, Grandpa Mu was also a playboy. He had married 3 wives, and he had attracted a lot of love affairs. Mu Wanru faintly said, "Grandpa, do you still remember the girl who was my surrogate 6 years ago?" "Yes." Mu Sheng's eyes darkened. That girl was chosen by him. She was very delicate and pretty, with outstanding features and an aura of purity. What was more commendable was that her eyes were very similar to that woman's. Too similar, it was as if she was a carbon copy. Hence, Mu Sheng took a liking to her at first glance. Mu Wanru continued, "I think that woman's background is not simple." Chapter 291. Grandpa Mu's eyebrows twitched, and he quickly asked, "What do you mean?" "This woman is quite ambitious and scheming. I don't know how she managed to sneak into Huan Yu's cocktail party. Not only did she deliberately show off in front of Zhe, but she also tried to find opportunities to get close to Xiao Chen. What do you think? Is she trying to use her son to climb up the social ladder?" Mu Wanru's eyes were filled with sadness as she spoke. "Xiao Chen has never been close to me since we were young. I'm worried that she's plotting something to drive a wedge between me and my son. Grandpa, please be reasonable. Don't you think she's too much?" Mu Wanru recalled the intimate scene between Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja on the dance floor on the day of the cocktail party. She felt a stab of pain in her heart. An actress? Grandpa Mu snorted coldly. He was a rather old-fashioned person. He had never liked the people in the entertainment industry, especially those female celebrities. He always felt that they were scheming and came from unknown backgrounds. None of them were good people. Among the rich and powerful, the celebrities in the entertainment industry were the ones who were looked down upon the most. Although the celebrities were very popular nowadays, in the eyes of the older generation of aristocrats, they were just mediocre actresses. Since ancient times, there was a saying that a prostitute was heartless and an actor was heartless. Therefore, it was not a prejudice. It was just that the rich and powerful looked down on the people in the entertainment industry. Mu Wanru gritted her teeth and nodded. "Yes, I don't know how she managed to sneak into the entertainment industry. Do you think she did it on purpose?" "Oomph. If that brat dares to bring an actress with an unknown background into the Mu family, he can try." Grandpa Mu was so angry that his lips were trembling. He knocked on his walking stick and scolded, "I can't stand those lowly actresses. Moreover, the contract clearly states that she can't cause any trouble for the child's custody. Otherwise, she'll have to bear the consequences. If she insists, she'll burn herself." Mu Wanru was secretly happy when she heard that. However, she pretended to be helpless and said, "But what if she protects her?" "Grandpa, do you know that some women are born to be seductive? They are born to seduce men. How dare he? Why wouldn't he dare?" Mu Wanru pouted and said, He hasn't been home for the past 2 days. He must be with that woman. Grandpa, you have to help me. What? Mu Sheng's eyes widened in fury. I'll teach him a good lesson when he comes back. Don't be sad. Grandfather will uphold justice for you. Yes. Mu Wanren nodded happily. Although Grandpa Mu was already in his 60s, he was still a man who had been involved in bloody battles when he was young. His methods were ruthless. If she were to borrow his means to get rid of Yin Sure, this thorn in her side, she wouldn't need to do anything. Old Master Mu was obviously still angry. He lifted his chin and looked around before asking with a strange expression, "Where's Yi Chen?" Mu Wanru immediately asked the nanny behind her, "Where's the young master?" "Young master is doing his morning exercise at the archery range. Go call him over for breakfast." "Yes." Mu Wanru sat down and carefully reached out to caress the old man's chest. She coquettishly said, "Grandpa, don't be angry. Why are you angry over such a slut?" Chapter 292. The villa was located in the southwest corner of the mansion. It was a huge indoor shooting range. Mu Yaja had always been willing to invest a lot of effort into Xiao Chen. When Xiao Chen had just learned how to walk, Mu Yaja had sent him to the special training camp to observe the soldiers' special training. When he was young, Grandpa Mu had also trained him in the same way. Every summer, he would send him to the special training camp to undergo special training. Under Mu Yaja's influence, Xiao Chen had developed a strong interest in firearms and combat at a young age. When he was 2 years old and the other children were still learning how to speak, Xiao Chen was already holding a pacifier in his mouth. He could skillfully assemble and load all kinds of firearms and ammunition. When he was 3 years old, he could even load and shoot skillfully. Even Grandpa Mu could not help but click his tongue in amazement. Children of the same age as Xiao Chen might still be learning how to speak. Those who were talented liked to draw on white paper and were still obsessed with interesting toys. However, Xiao Chen seemed to have inherited Mu Yaja's iron-blooded genes. He did not like to play with words and ink. Instead, he was obsessed with combat and firearms. When he was 5 years old, he officially entered the military camp. Not only did he not complain about the heavy training, but he was also very excited about it. Grandpa Mu was in awe. Not only was this child not inferior to Mu Yaja when he was young, but he had even surpassed him in terms of maturity. The villa was not only equipped with a fencing hall, but it was also equipped with an archery hall, a shooting range, and a combat arena. All of these were prepared for Xiao Chen. At the same time, in the archery hall, it was quiet. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the ground. Xiao Chen was wearing a smart and neat protective suit. He stood upright and held a heavy bow in his hand. He held his breath and focused on aiming at the target 100 meters away. His fingers pulled the bowstring. Swoosh! The arrow that was released from the bowstring seemed to have the power of a thunderbolt. It was like an arrow made of sparks. It was shot in an instant and accurately hit the bull's eye. Young master. Behind him, the nanny who had rushed over had been waiting for a long time. Seeing him put down the bow, she said softly, "Master and young madam want you to have breakfast." Xiao Chen acted as if he hadn't heard anything. He turned around with a cold expression and took off his equipment expressionlessly. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned around to ask, "Did Daddy come back last night?" Young master didn't come back last night." "Oh." Xiao Chen furrowed his brows slightly, and there was a hint of loneliness in his eyes. After a moment of silence, he picked up the towel handed to him by a servant and wiped the sweat off his face. "I'm not going. Tell Grandpa and Mommy that I have no appetite." His cold words revealed that he was somewhat disappointed at the moment. The nanny said with a worried face, "Young master, if you don't go eat breakfast, master will be worried. Skipping breakfast isn't good for your health." "Then prepare a copy for me and send it to my study," Xiao Chen said coldly and walked out of the archery range. Behind him, the nanny looked at his cold figure and sighed softly. The father and son were exactly the same in terms of temperament. Chapter 293. When she opened the door, the apartment was cold and empty. Mu Yaja followed behind her. The moment he stepped into the extremely small space, a look of disdain appeared on his face out of displeasure. This apartment was too small. To Yun Shir and Yu, this apartment was extremely spacious. Compared to the second-hand apartment that Papa Yun had bought previously, this apartment had 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, 1 bedroom, 1 study, and a 10-square-meter living room. It could be said that this apartment was very comfortable for them to live in. However, to Muyaja, who was nearly 9 meters tall, this place seemed especially cramped. Standing in such a small space with his hands and feet tied, he felt extremely restrained. Yun Shir rushed into the room and hurriedly prepared a change of clothes for Yu. The material of the hospital gown was coarse, and the child's skin was soft and sensitive. Sleeping in a hospital gown was really unsettling. Although Yu did not mention it, Yun Shir was attentive. With one glance, she saw the red rash on his wrist due to his sensitive body. Her heart ached terribly. Although the clothes that she bought for Yu were not expensive, she had specially selected the best quality. Yu had a weak body, so she was very careful about everything, no matter how big or small. During this time, Muyaja had some free time, so he curiously took a look around the small apartment. After entering, there was a bathroom that was as small as a fish tank on the left. Muyaja frowned as he walked in. His head almost bumped into the door frame. It was too small. The space of 7 to 8 square meters was stuffed with an old automatic washing machine, a toilet bowl, and a sink. When he walked in, he accidentally bumped his knee into the washing machine. The man frowned slightly. He was extremely displeased and was even more disgusted. The bathroom was described as smaller than a fish tank because there was a wall-mounted aquarium outside the living room of the Mu residence. Just the aquarium alone was 5 to 6 meters long, so it was indeed much bigger than this bathroom. A human is inferior to a fish? Muyaja walked into the kitchen again. The first thing he saw was 2 little bare aprons hanging on the barbs. One big and one small. It looked very warm. There was a duty list on the door. He glanced at it. There were 7 days in a week. Yu was responsible for 5 days of meals, and Yun Shir was responsible for 3 meals on weekends. The man smiled and could not help but find it interesting. It turned out that this Xiao Bao knew how to cook. A 6-year-old child actually knows how to do housework. I wonder how good her skills are. In the south, there were 2 rooms side by side. One of them was a study. Muyaja was a little taken aback when he walked in. There was a fax machine, a printer, a mahogany desk, a high-end computer, and a lock safe on the desk. Other than that, there was a pencil case and a thick stack of blueprints. Everything was neatly organized. What he did not know was that everything in the study was arranged by Yun Shir according to Yun Tianyo's blueprints. It looked like a small office. Usually, Yu was the only one taking care of it, and Yun Shir never interfered. Muyaja glanced at the blueprints on the table and picked them up curiously. He could not help being stunned when he glanced at them. This thick stack of blueprints was actually a toy blueprint. The drawing was exquisite and meticulous. Be it the design or concept, it was ingenious. Such a design draft was clearly from an excellent and professional designer. Chapter 294. Muyaja. The man raised his head. At the door of the study, Yun Shir was carrying a pile of heavy laundry. Seeing the design drawings in his hands, she warned him sternly, "Don't touch anything in this study, or else you will be angry." This study was Yu's little world. Usually, Yun Shir would come in to clean it, but she would not touch anything in the study. Muyaja put down the drawings and walked out of the study. Looking from the corner of his eye, he strode into the bedroom as if he had discovered a new continent. Yun Shir, who was standing at the side, had cold lines on her forehead. This was akin to a wealthy aristocrat visiting a slum. She did not think much of it, though. Carrying the clothes into the bathroom, she planned to wash them while she was here. Muyaja then took a tour of the bedroom. At the entrance, there was a double bed. The light blue bedding and sheets gave off a sense of childlike innocence and warmth. Yu liked the color blue, but she also liked simplicity. Hence, there were not many patterns on the sheets. It was very simple. The bedside table was filled with all kinds of books. He casually picked up a few. There were novels, fables, comic books, and fairy tales. It was as if he had finally found a trace of a child's innocence here. He slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. The scene of Yin Tianyu leaning against the headboard and lazily flipping through the comic books surfaced in his mind. These books were recommended to parents by the school. Yin Shirshir specially bought a few sets from the bookstore and placed them on the bedside table. Every night before bed, she would hug Yin Tianyu and gently tell him the stories from the comic books. Usually, Yin Tianyu was uninterested in these children's comics and books. He always found them boring, but he liked listening to his mommy tell him stories. Yin Shirshir's voice was very gentle. It was soft and sweet, just like a Jiangnan woman's. Listening to her sweet voice in his dreams was the happiest thing in Yun Tianyu's heart. In a narrow space, there was a strong atmosphere of life, as well as a tranquil little warmth. Although the room was a little small and the double bed was not spacious enough, Muyaja lay down with his arms as a pillow. He could not even stretch his limbs freely. However, on the blanket, there was the unique milky fragrance of a child, as well as the unique fresh body fragrance of Yin Shirshir. This fragrance was tranquil and gentle. It wasn't overbearing, but it was refreshing. Muyaja felt a moment of peace in his heart. When Yin Shirshir walked into the bedroom again, the man was lying on the bed, deeply asleep. She couldn't help but smile. She still remembered that a certain man had said that she had more energy than others. Yin Shirshir quietly walked to the bedside, squatted down, and looked at the man's exquisite sleeping face closely. The man in deep sleep had his eyes gently closed. The dim light engraved a thin layer of shadow on his angular facial features. His long, narrow eyes and thick, black eyelashes were beautiful and charming. Yin Shirshir raised her eyebrows in surprise. She remembered that when Yu was born, he had a head of thick, black hair. When his eyes were closed, his eyelashes were fine and dense, even thicker than hers. It turned out that he had inherited this man's genes. He had a high-nose bridge and a beautiful curve. He was like a sculpture that had been carved with the finest craftsmanship. Chapter 295. Yin Shirshir looked at every inch of his face and suddenly admitted that this man was very good-looking. Sometimes it had to be said that the heavens were biased. They gave him all the best things in the world and were not stingy at all. His monstrous interpretation, his wealth that could rival a country, his inexhaustible wealth, and even gave him a heaven-shocking appearance. He was incomparably handsome and perfect, but gave him a strange temperament. His mood was unpredictable and his personality was very bad. Perhaps it was the style of the children of aristocratic families, always putting themselves first. If he liked it, he had to get it. If he couldn't get it, he would destroy it and not give it to others. If he didn't like it, he didn't want it. He would never force himself for anyone and was insufferably arrogant. But he had this kind of capital. While she was lost in thought, the man on the bed suddenly opened his eyes and looked into her eyes. Yin Shirshir was caught off guard and was stunned. In the next second, an arm powerfully wrapped around her waist and pulled her into his embrace. The world in front of her eyes turned upside down, and in an instant, she was pressed down by the man's body. The double bed was not big, and it was hard for it to fit the man's tall body, but the texture was very soft. The bed was slightly sunken, and her body sank in. Muyaja's heavy body fell on top of her, and it was hard for her to breathe. Yin Shirshir's cheeks turned red because of his heavy body. "Hey, Muyaja, what are you doing?" Muyaja lowered his head and sniffed the gentle fragrance in her hair. His deep voice sounded like orchids in her ears. "Sleeping with my woman." "What?" She thought she had heard wrong. The man kindly reminded her. "I said, sleeping with you." Yin Shirshir was a bit defeated by him and angrily said, "Are you a stud horse? Can't you think of something else other than this?" "If I'm a stud horse, are you being planted?" She simply gave up, struggling. How could she forget that this man had always been overbearing and aloof? He never cared about other people's feelings. She didn't struggle anymore, nor did she push him. She simply spread out her body and let him do whatever he wanted. She closed her eyes expressionlessly and did not resist at all. She was as quiet as a dead fish. However, the stalemate continued, and neither of them made a move. However, the man on top of her just quietly imprisoned her and didn't make the next move for a long time. She had some doubts in her heart. She opened her eyes slightly and saw Muyaja looking down at her. His gaze was scrutinizing and sizing her up. Suddenly, he said coldly, Yin sure, aren't you a little too tactless? What do you mean? The line of women waiting for me to pamper them stretches from here to Milan. Yet you're avoiding me like the plague. Muyaja looked at her coldly. He had seen too many tricks of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. There were always some women who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth acting in front of him. Therefore, he could tell at a glance that this woman's resistance and disobedience towards him was not some pretentious trick. Instead, he was really trying to avoid him. Arrogance. It was as if she should treat his favor as a great gift and kowtow to thank him sincerely. Yin sure sneered. They're blind, but I'm not blind. Are they blind? Muyaja turned slightly and supported his body with his arm. He stared at her calmly and asked, How are they blind? Yin sure was speechless. Chapter 296. There are so many women in the world. Why do you have to be entangled with me? It's none of your business. Muyaja lifted her chin and his handsome face slowly approached her. His slightly cold lips were printed on the corner of her lips, and his warm breath invaded her lips. Gradually, his breathing was no longer calm and became a little rapid. His sexy thin lips gently wandered around her neck, embellishing it with light kisses, and he craved for more. At this moment, he was like a lost and thirsty traveler in the desert, and she was like a clear and pure spiritual spring. He repeatedly tasted it, but he still couldn't quench his thirst. His thin lips kissed all the way up her beautiful neck. His arms wrapped around her slim waist and pushed her back, forcing her body to be close to his chest. Through the thin material of her clothes, he seemed to be able to feel the warmth from her skin. It was tender, warm, and beautiful. Muyaja's right hand held the back of her neck, forcing her to meet his lips. His warm breath covered her lips, and in an instant, she was completely engulfed. No longer satisfied with such a light kiss, the man arrogantly attacked again, all the way to the city. However, his attack was limited to kisses and didn't go as deep as the previous few times. The temperature in the room suddenly rose. Ambiguity, charm, and sweetness swept through. She endured it, but she was silent. Muyaja couldn't accept her lack of reaction. The tip of his tongue pried open her lips, either passionately or seductively teasing her, trying to get her to respond. However, from the beginning to the end, Yin sure only closed her eyes, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. If he wanted it, she would give it to him. It wasn't too complicated. Even if she struggled, it was useless. Instead, it aroused the man's strong desire to conquer. If she opened her body and let him do whatever he wanted, he would definitely feel indifferent and even lose interest in her. At that time, wouldn't she be free? Get rid of this man and return to her own life. As expected, she didn't respond. Muyaja only felt that it was dull, and the kiss came to an abrupt end. Looking up, the man looked at her stubborn and arrogant face and frowned slightly in displeasure. It was very boring. He would rather she struggle and resist. That way, at least he would feel the pleasure of conquering. However, she opened her body and let him do whatever he wanted, and he lost interest. He lowered his head in dissatisfaction and bit her earlobe as a punishment. A sharp pain pierced through her earlobe. She clenched her teeth tightly and did not make a sound. Even if it hurt, there was no response. Do you think you're a dead fish? She didn't know how to respond? Or did she feel that it was too difficult to be with him? Since you want it, I'll give it to you. I'll be obedient. Don't you want me to be obedient? Yun sure retorted sarcastically with a hint of disgust in her eyes. Of his arrogance and his forcefulness. Very of his words. Wasn't hers. Muyaja lowered his head abruptly. His thin lips brushed past her jade-like collarbones and landed on her neck. He sucked on her skin fiercely, his hot breath continuously blowing on her skin. Chapter 297. The woman in the mirror had flushed cheeks and gloomy eyes. On her exposed neck, there was a red, swollen, and ambiguous kiss mark. She was shocked to see it. The glaring mark was like a man's insignia on her body. It was an eyesore. Ew. Yin sure was furious. She rubbed her fingertips hard, but the mark only became more red and swollen. making it even more obvious. It was already midsummer, yet he left such an obvious mark on her neck. He was clearly trying to embarrass her. How could this man be so vile? She turned around and gritted her teeth. Muyaja, you're too much. This is punishment. Punishment? Yin Shirshir widened her eyes in disbelief. What a self-righteous man. She turned around and left the room in anger. Muyaja stared at her back view as she left in a huff. His lips curled into a triumphant smile. Yin Shirshir rushed into the kitchen and leaned against the sink. She scooped up a handful of water and splashed it on her burning cheeks, as if this was the only way to cool down her burning skin quickly. She took a wet towel and wiped her cheeks and neck repeatedly. She rubbed it fiercely as if she wanted to wipe off the man's scent and marks on her body. However, after a while, she sighed in vain. Why did he have to make things difficult for himself? Was he torturing himself as well? Grumble. A long and weak sound came from her stomach. She was hungry. Biting her lower lip, she opened the fridge gloomily. There were not many ingredients left at home. There were only a few eggs, a piece of beef, and a bundle of dried noodles. Thus, she thought of making some food to fill her stomach, and then rushing to the hospital to replace Yun Yeching. Her culinary skills were not considered good. When she was in the Yun family, all the household chores were done by her. At that time, she was still studying. Although she had to work daily and was very busy, Yun Yeching's 3 shifts were reversed. Li Qin had never cooked before, so she could not count on Yana to do so. Thus, she had to cook all 3 meals at home. After she moved out of the Yun family and stepped into society, she was often overwhelmed with work. Fortunately, Yu was obedient and sensible. Feeling sorry for her busy work, he bought a stack of cookery books from the bookstore and developed some good culinary skills. In the end, Yu's cooking was far beyond her standards. However, her culinary skills were not bad. The beef was sliced and fried out of the wok. The noodles were placed in the wok and 2 eggs were placed on top. After a while, a large bowl of noodles was brought out of the kitchen. Muyaja smelled the aroma from far away in the bedroom. Smelling the aroma, he walked out of the room. Yin Shirshir went back to the kitchen to get a pair of chopsticks and a spoon. When she came out, she saw the man sitting at the dining table leisurely, holding a bowl of noodles and tasting a mouthful of broth. It was surprisingly delicious. The man raised his eyebrows and licked away the soup stain on the corner of his lips with the tip of his tongue. Clearly, he was savoring the taste. Muyaja lowered his head and stared at the noodles in the bowl. In addition to the noodles, there were 2 poached eggs and a few slices of beef. But for some reason, the aroma was overflowing and aroused his appetite. There was no doubt that he was hungry, too. He did not feel anything at first, but when the aroma wafted into the room, his taste buds had a subtle reaction. What is this? He had never seen a noodle soup with such ingredients. The chefs hired by the Mu residents were all high-class chefs from 5-star hotels. Their culinary skills were well known. Whether it was Chinese, Western, or French cuisine, they were a piece of cake. However, no matter how delicious it was, after 20 years of repeated cooking, one would get tired of it. Chapter 298. After all, young Master Mu had been living a luxurious life since he was young, so he had never seen what was called vermicelli. Could it be that someone as rich as him had never eaten vermicelli before? That was true. This was the food of the commoners. A noble like him would never have the chance to try it. Yin Shirshir was silent. She was a bit speechless. She placed the chopsticks and spoon on the table. A certain man naturally picked up the chopsticks and began to eat the vermicelli. He was actually eating with relish. Outside the window, the sunlight spilled into the windowsill. Muyaja's back was straight. Even when he was eating the vermicelli, he still had an elegant manner. He was very quiet and did not even make a single sound. She finally believed that he was a true noble. The good etiquette that he had received since he was young was clearly displayed at the dining table. Even if he was holding the most common bowl of vermicelli in his hands, he still maintained the noble and elegant aura of a noble. This kind of aura was not fake. If it wasn't for the elegant etiquette that he had received since he was young, this kind of aura would have seeped into his bones over the past 10 years. Yin Shirshir helplessly pursed her lips. Seeing that her portion of vermicelli had been snatched away, she could only turn back to make another one. When she brought it out again, Muyaja had already silently finished the vermicelli in the bowl. It seemed like it was to his taste. Not even a drop of broth was left. She glanced at the bowl and saw that he had really finished it all. He had eaten it very elegantly. Not even a drop of broth was spilled on the table. The etiquette of a noble was really complicated. Isn't he tired? Yun Sure silently cursed in her heart. She sat at the table and was about to eat the vermicelli when she saw Muyaja's deep gaze land on the bowl of vermicelli in her hand. "This is mine," she muttered unhappily. To be precise, the portion that he had just eaten was originally hers. Seeing the hidden desire in his eyes, she quickly used her hand to protect the bowl of vermicelli. She was afraid that he would snatch it away again, so she warned him, "This bowl of vermicelli is mine." "Cook me another bowl," he demanded confidently. After finishing the bowl of noodles, he still wanted more. Yin Sure had obviously underestimated his appetite. He was a man after all, and he hadn't eaten his fill for the entire night. Naturally, he was hungry. Her brows furrowed, and she was speechless. "If you want to eat more, go cook it yourself." Muyaja's handsome eyes fixed on her. "I won't. No. Serves you right to starve." She was not surprised to see the man's handsome face turn gloomy as she said this. Yin Sure was a little pleased with herself. She had been bullied by him so many times. This time, she had finally gotten back at him. Let him watch her eat to her heart's content. You'll be starved to death. Yin Sure cursed in her heart with satisfaction. She skillfully picked up the noodles with her chopsticks and slurped a mouthful. Slurp, slurp. She didn't eat vermicelli as elegantly as Muyaja. Even when eating, he had to maintain a noble demeanor. He didn't even make a sound when eating vermicelli. If you want to eat vermicelli, you have to slurp it. Yin Sure was really hungry, so she was too lazy to care about her demeanor in front of him. She took a big bite and stuffed her mouth full. When eating vermicelli, it was inevitable to make a small sound. Chapter 299. Muyaja frowned a little. Although he felt that she didn't look ladylike, he didn't know why. But seeing her eating like this, coupled with the slurping sound of the noodles, he felt that the noodles were even more delicious. Yin Sure was so engrossed in her food that she did not realize that the man sitting opposite her had quietly stood up and silently appeared beside her. He leaned over, grabbed her hand that was holding the chopsticks, and kissed her on the lips. He put the noodles that she had just eaten into his mouth. Muyaja's lips curled into a smile, clearly finding it delicious. Yin Sure was stunned. She suddenly wiped her lips with the back of her hand and pushed the bowl of noodles in front of him. After being teased by him, she completely lost her appetite. "You eat. I'm not eating anymore. Why are you angry? Who cares about you? Go and eat your clear soup noodles." Yin Sure glared at him speechlessly and went to the bathroom to take the washed clothes to cool. Muyaja saw her angry appearance and was in a good mood. He sat back at the table and enjoyed the noodles in the bowl with satisfaction. When Yin Sure came back from cooling the clothes, there was no one at the table. The sound of the shower came from the shower. From time to time, the man's frustrated curses could be heard. He was sweating a little after eating the noodles. Plus, he was sweating in the hot and stuffy hospital, so he wanted to take a shower. However, there was a problem with the water heater. The water came out intermittently, and it was sometimes cold and sometimes hot. This made a certain young master who had always lived a good life suffer a little. Yin Sure's lips twitched. This man really didn't treat her as an outsider. He completely treated this place as his own home. After washing the dishes, there was a knock on the door. Yin Sure was suspicious. She opened the door and was shocked by the solemn scene outside. In the narrow corridor, there were 2 rows of men in black suits standing straight. Each of them had a cold expression and didn't smile. The 2 men standing at the front were holding a stack of clean clothes and walked in as if there was no one around. Just then, the bathroom door opened and Muyaja walked out with a gloomy face. The water heater was hot and cold. At this moment, his face was as black as ink. The man in the suit stood behind him and handed the clothes over. Muyaja was rubbing his wet hair with a towel. His lower body was wrapped in a teddy bear bath towel, and his upper body was bare. His well-defined muscles were stained with water, making him look exceptionally sexy and charming. Yun Shirshi's gaze fell on the teddy bear bath towel, and she held her forehead in annoyance. This bath towel was specially used by Yu. Every time the little fellow finished bathing, he would drape this bath towel over his body. However, when it was used on a man, it was so small that it could only cover half of his body. Hey, Yun Shirshir pointed at the towel on his body. This is Yu's special towel. Muyaja glanced at her unhappily. And my son is obsessed with cleanliness. Yun Shirshir mocked. Muyaja's lips twitched. He could no longer maintain his elegant bearing. Woman, you let my son live in such a shabby place? Chapter 300. Your so-called lousy place costs a few thousand a month. Young Master Mu, I'm not like you, who is so rich that you can rival a country. This place is already very decent. It's just that the water heater is broken. This man was too much. What did he mean by lousy place? Did he think that everyone was like him, with mountains of gold and silver at home? This was the capital. It was not a small city. Even if the apartment here was not in a good location, the land price was not cheap. A month's rent was already very considerable for her. Muyaja, however, asked, do we need to rent such a lousy place? Yes. The man in the suit helped him change into clean and fresh clothes. Muyaja impatiently rubbed his wet hair and walked forward to pick her up. Let's go. Oh, where are we going? I can't tolerate my woman and son living in a pigsty. Pigsty? Wait, did he say that her home was a pigsty? She was about to throw a tantrum when Muyaja strode over and, without giving her a chance to protest, half-carried her to the door before kicking it open with a kick. The landlord next door heard the commotion and opened the door, only to see the corridor full of bodyguards. He couldn't help but be stunned. She looked up and saw the tall man who was carrying Yun Shirshir downstairs. She was shocked. She took a closer look and saw that it was Yun Shirshir. She immediately went forward and said, Hey, by the way, I've been looking for you for the past 2 days. Why haven't you been home? Your rent this month. The apartment Yun Shirshir rented was a property under her name. When the building opened, she bought 2 units. One of them was intended to be her son's future wedding house. However, her son was still in high school. She felt that it was a waste to leave it empty, so she simply renovated it and rented it out. As soon as she finished speaking, Muyaja impatiently refused, I'm not renting it. Huh? The landlord was stunned as he watched them leave. Asterisk. Chairman Mu, how about this one? It's 532 square meters, 7 rooms, 3 halls, and 5 guards. It has a private garden and a swimming pool. The villa has a total of 5 floors and has a private elevator. At the Shawnee Walk sales office, a sales manager was introducing a luxurious villa to a cold-looking man sitting on the sofa. Muyaja took the brochure from his hand, glanced at it, and lowered his head to ask the woman in his arms for her opinion. Do you like it? Yun Shirshir was still in a daze. She shook her head. Seeing her shake her head, Muyaja didn't ask why she didn't like it. Instead, he directly said to the sales manager who was looking at him expectantly, Change. Good. Please wait a moment, Chairman Mu. The manager did not have the slightest impatience and respectfully retreated. Yun Shirshir raised her head and looked around. She still felt like she was in a dream. Shawnee Walk was a high-end real estate developed by Dishing Financial Group this year. It catered to high-end customers. The average price of a 500-square-meter villa was as high as 80 million yuan. After conversion, the average price was 160,000 yuan per square meter. It was so extravagant that it made people speechless. This real estate had villas, bungalows, and high-end apartments for high-class white-collar workers. It had a retro palace-style, Mediterranean style. It was luxurious, dignified, and uniquely elegant. It was one of the most luxurious real estate in the capital. The sales manager did not recognize Muyaja at first. He only thought that he was an ordinary customer, so he did not pay much attention to him. Chapter 301. After all, he was just a sales manager. With such an ordinary status, he had no chance to meet Dishing's CEO in person. Hence, when Muyaja walked into the sales hall with Yun Shirshir in his arms, he treated them as ordinary customers. However, it was not until his assistant introduced them. Manager Lee, this is our boss, the CEO of Dishing Financial Group, Mr. Mu. Only then did he feel greatly surprised. Xiaoni Walk was one of Dishing Financial Group's assets, but he could never have imagined that the mysterious CEO Mu was so young. Moreover, he was shockingly handsome. Who was the woman beside him? He had heard that the CEO had a fiancée. Could this be her? On second thought, the manager smiled, but he immediately understood what was going on. His attitude became even more respectful. CEO Mu, what do you think of this? It's a large, luxurious, and well-furnished garden bungalow. It's 232 square meters and has a very quiet atmosphere. Mu Yaja pushed the brochure to Yin Shishir. Do you like it? Yin Shishir took a look at it and could not help but pick it up. It's so beautiful. This beautiful lady, do you like this set? Seeing that she was finally interested, the sales manager at the side asked with a gentle smile. I like it, but it's too big. Don't you have a smaller one? She had originally planned to move to another house. Her father had given her a bank card with a sum of money in it. However, at 200 square meters, it was a little too big. Usually, she, Yu, and her father lived together, so it was a little too spacious. The manager smiled embarrassedly. This is already the smallest bungalow. What about the condominium? Yin Shishir asked again. The manager wiped his sweat and helplessly said, the first phase of the condominium was sold out 5 months after it opened. The second phase is still under development. You don't like it? Yin Shishir was vexed. I like it. This garden bungalow was her favorite retro palace design. It was elegant and beautiful. It was her dream home. This one, then. Mu Yaja's slender finger pointed at the brochure. Good. Please wait for a moment, Chairman Mu. The manager put away the booklet and was about to leave. Yin Shishir was so shocked that she stopped him. Wait, miss, do you have any other orders? The manager asked curiously. Yin Shishir said, I haven't decided yet. Consider what? Mu Yaja's face darkened. When he asked her if she liked it, didn't she say yes? Where did all these considerations come from? Yin Shishir ignored him and asked the manager, how much is this set? The manager was stunned when he heard that. Mu Yaja frowned. That's not for you to consider. How is it not something I consider? What if I can't afford it? The manager's lips twitched. This girl, wasn't she President Mu's little lover? But it didn't seem like it. Chairman Mu had never been so intimate with a woman before. If she wasn't his lover, why would he specially buy a bungalow to hide his mistress? Shermao Champagne Lake and a huge villa were all under his name. Why would he need to specially buy a bungalow? Woman, are you stupid? Mu Yaja glanced at her unhappily. I don't need you to buy it for me. I'll buy it myself. Chapter 302. Mu Yaja gazed deeply at her. Seeing how stubborn she was and how she was glaring at him, it was obvious that she was very dissatisfied with his act of giving her money. Suddenly, he smiled deeply and sank into the sofa casually. He raised his hand lazily and motioned for the manager to quote the price. Hello, this one is 45 million. Yin Shishir was petrified. Mu Yaja enjoyed her shocked expression. Seeing that she was stunned for a long time, he couldn't help but mock her. What? Didn't you say that you wanted to buy it yourself? She was speechless. She thought that a villa would cost tens of millions, and a garden bungalow wouldn't be that expensive. Yin Shishir bit her lips and felt depressed. Why aren't you being stubborn anymore? Mu Yaja asked coldly. He looked up and motioned for the manager to leave immediately. The procedures to get the property certificate weren't complicated. Everything was done so quickly that it was unreasonable. Therefore, when the manager handed the new property certificate to Yin Shishir, she still couldn't come back to her senses. Mu Yaja, who was standing at the side, leaned forward slightly to admire her dumbfounded expression. His heart was filled with joy. Are you touched? You don't have to sleep in the slums anymore. Why'd you give me this bungalow? Was this man going to use this to sign an unfair contract with her again? Mu Yaja saw her wary expression and couldn't help but mock her. Do you want me to watch my son sleep in a pigsty? That's not a pigsty. Yin Shishir emphasized again. Mu Yaja glanced at her and didn't say anything else. To him, that kind of place was no different from pigsty. It was small and unsafe. There were dozens of residents living in that building. It might even be more than that. It was difficult to avoid miscellaneous people. In addition, the security was not in place, so anyone could come and go as they pleased. How could he allow his woman and son to live in such a foul place? However, at that moment, the woman in front of him looked stubborn and carefully protected her pitiful self-esteem in front of him. For some reason, he didn't say anything else. He said indifferently, "This is a gift." Yin Shishir's expression froze. That bowl of noodles as a gift. Yin Shishir was a little confused. What did he mean? A bowl of clear soup in exchange for a luxurious mansion? In this way, her bowl of noodles was worth tens of millions? Heavens, this was undoubtedly like winning the lottery, right? So if I make a few more bowls of noodles for you, will you give me a few more mansions? Muyaja looked at her speechlessly. Yin Shishir looked at him provocatively. Without a doubt, if he agreed, she would make noodles for him every day. They had to eat him dry. His phone's ringtone interrupted the strange silence in a timely manner. Muyaja originally wanted to cut off the call, but when he saw the screen, his expression turned serious. He immediately walked to the side and picked up the phone, replying in a deep voice, "Grandpa." On the phone, the old master's voice was gloomy and angry, but he tried to control himself. "You finally know how to answer the phone. If I don't call you, you won't know where you are?" Seeing that he was silent, the old master became even more furious. "Do you still know how to go home? Wanru called you so many times. Why didn't you answer? Do you still see her as your wife and me as your grandfather?" Chapter 303. "Grandpa, I'm not married to her yet," Muyaja said solemnly. "What do you mean by that? So what if you're not married? She's your fiancée and your future wife. Are you trying to drive me to my grave?" Grandpa Mu was infuriated. He coughed violently and cursed. "You're trying to make me angry." Grandpa, on the other end, Mu Sheng bellowed in exasperation. "Cut the crap. I'll give you 20 minutes. Come back immediately." Do. The call was hung up. Muyaja's expression turned cold and gloomy in an instant. When Yin Tianyu woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he had been transferred to a different ward. It was even a special ward. Luxurious decorations, elegant style, and excellent equipment. A ward was actually created with a magnificent atmosphere. It had a living room, a study room, and a bathroom. His eyes swept across the room and saw Yun Yeching lying on the bed with his clothes on. He was snoring lightly and heavily with a tired face. He had not slept for 2 days and 2 nights. He was already exhausted. "Why is it him?" Yin Tianyu frowned slightly, but he did not care too much about it and did not wake him up. He did not have much hatred for Yun Yeching. He just felt that this man was too incompetent for causing his mother to suffer so much. In his heart, a man who caused his mother to suffer was useless. Did he need to say all sorts of excuses for not being able to protect someone? They were all excuses. If his mother chose to forgive him, he would also choose to let it go. Grumble. Yu rubbed his belly. He was a little hungry, so he got out of bed and shuffled to the living room in his slippers. Lee Hamlin was sitting on the sofa. When he saw him coming out, he immediately stood up and greeted respectfully, "Director Yin, why are you here?" Grumble. Before he could finish his sentence, his stomach growled again. Lee Hamlin looked at him with a smile in his eyes. "Hungry. Yin Tianyu looked away in embarrassment, feeling that his smile was a little dazzling. "Did you bring food?" "Yes. I knew that you would be hungry when you woke up, so I brought your favorite Fuji bento," Lee Hamlin said as he took out a bento and placed it on the table. "Who asked me to be the special assistant of the 24 filial piety? Where's my mommy? When I came earlier, she was already gone." Nodding his head, he sat on the sofa and gracefully finished his lunch. Lee Hamlin hurriedly took out a stack of board documents and passed them to him. Yu took the documents and flipped through them one by one. These documents were all proposals from the board meeting and would be submitted to him for final approval. Those who agreed would sign their names, and the rest would be dismissed. As he flipped through the documents, he coldly remarked, "These old good-for-nothings are getting more and more useless as they get older." The more he read, the more his brows furrowed. Abruptly, he threw the document in his hand into the air. The official documents were scattered all over the ground, like snowflakes drifting down. He stood up expressionlessly, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and coldly said, "Since they're so useless, why don't they just lie in their coffins? I'll kindly burn a pile of paper money for them." Lee Hamlin was silent. How black-bellied, Lee Hamlin silently criticized him in his heart. This was his usual style, though. Chapter 304. Yun Tianyu snorted. "Oomph. You're trying so hard to replace me. You should know your place first." Lee Hamlin was shocked and hurriedly said, "No one in the company can replace Director Yun's position. That's for sure." Yun Tianyu turned to look at him intently. "Without me, the company is nothing but a wasteland." Lee Hamlin was shocked. Although his words were calm, they hit a sharp edge and were extraordinarily bold. If someone else were to say this, they would be considered arrogant. But when it came from his mouth, it was incomparably convincing. Then, the official documents, reject them all. Understood. Lee Hamlin arranged the documents and suddenly stood up. "Director Yun, are you willing to meet the person outside?" "Who?" "Li Qin." He opened the door and saw Li Qin standing uneasily outside. He did not know how long she had been waiting. Her face lit up with joy when she saw the door open, but her heart plummeted at the sight of Yun Tianyu walking out with a cold face. "Why are you here?" Yun Tianyu glanced at her coldly, mocking her for her ridiculousness. "This is my ward. Why can't it be me?" Li Qin was speechless for a moment, but when she realized that this was not the time to bicker with him, she hurriedly asked, "Where's your mommy? I want to see her." Yun Tianyu sneered, not taking her seriously at all. "Who are you? Is my mommy someone you can meet whenever you want?" Li Qin's face turned red at his words, and she bellowed in exasperation. "You child, why are you so stubborn? How can you talk to your elders like that? AB*TCH like you is only fit to talk to me like that." Ew. She raised her hand in anger and swung it toward his little face. It was just like how she had insulted him in the Yun family. Yun Tianyu only raised his head to look at her coldly. Her palm swung toward him with a swift and fierce gust of wind. Her eyes did not even blink as they emitted a trace of coldness. Lee Hamlin's face darkened. He quickly blocked her palm, grabbed her wrist, and pushed her to the ground. She landed on her, but as if she was going to fall apart. Lee Hamlin's strength was not small. In front of him, she did not have the strength to fight back at all. She was in so much pain that she cried out. Yun Tianyu casually walked up to her and looked down at her from above. His lips curled into a mocking and cold smile. "Li Qin, why are you looking for my mommy?" Li Qin grimaced in pain. Hearing his question, she sneered disdainfully. "If there's anything, I have to discuss it with your mommy. I won't tell you. What would a child like you know?" "Hee hee. Yun Tianyu, you're getting more and more impudent. I'm your elder. I don't want to listen to nonsense." Yun Tianyu impatiently interrupted her. "Since you want my mommy to help you, why don't you give me a reason for her to help you?" Li Qin's expression changed, and a trace of bitterness appeared on her face. At least it's on account of the 20 years of mother-daughter relationship between me and her." Chapter 305. Friendship? What a mother-daughter relationship. Was it the friendship of 20 years of oppression and humiliation? Was it the friendship of being ostracized by him? He still could not forget the dark and heavy memories of his childhood. If that was the so-called affection. Yun Tianyu let out a lazy laugh. "All right, on account of our friendship. You, which ward?" She did not know if it was Yu's extraordinary aura or something else, but she actually answered hesitantly, 502. "Let's go." Yun Tianyu turned and ordered. Lee Hamlin immediately followed his footsteps. He couldn't wait to see how miserable Li Qin and Yun Na were right now. Lee Hamlin looked back at Li Qin with pity and mourned for her in his heart for a few seconds. Of all people to offend, she had to offend a little devil like Yun Tianyu. She would not even know how she died. It was no wonder that Li Qin had shamelessly come here. Now, she was forced into a corner and had no other way out. Yun Tianyu walked to the door of the ward and saw a group of onlookers crowding around it. He was not in a hurry to enter. Instead, he stood at the door and looked into the ward through the window. At one glance, he saw Yun Na hiding in a corner, covering her face and howling in pain. Her voice was hoarse and broken. The wound on her face was originally infected and suppurated. Now that someone had pulled it, the bandages on her face were scattered messily. Her face was stained with blood, and even her hospital gown was dirty. At this moment, Li Dongxiang stood in front of the hospital bed and kicked her body from time to time. He opened his mouth and scolded. "I told you to return the money, but you didn't listen to me, did you? Do you really think that I can't do anything to you just because you're hiding in a hospital? B*TCH. Brother Chong, I don't have money. I really don't have money. No money? I think you don't want to return it. If you don't want to, I'll take out your photos for others to admire. Who knows? Maybe they can be sold for a good price." He suddenly took out a stack of photos in his hand. It was unknown what kind of unsightly content was in the photos. When Yuna saw it, she immediately turned pale with fright. She immediately knelt down and reached out to snatch it. No. When Li Dongxiang saw her, he got angry and kicked her to the corner of the wall. Yuna's head slammed into the wall, and blood immediately flowed out of her head. She coughed out a mouthful of blood. "How disgusting," muttered Yin Tianyu coldly. Li Qin also rushed over. However, when she stood at the door and saw the messy ward, she froze on the spot and did not dare to step in. She didn't dare. She didn't have the guts. Li Dongxiang was a well-known hooligan in this area. It was not that they had not seen his methods before. He was vicious and merciless. She did not know how he managed to find his way to the hospital. As soon as he stepped into the ward, he threw Yuna onto the ground with a slap. Li Qin was scared out of her wits by the commotion. Knowing that the debt collectors had come knocking on her door, she hurriedly ran out of the ward, hoping to find Yun Yeqing and Yun Shishir to settle this matter. Both Yun Yeqing and Yun Shishir were rich. If she were to ask them for money and return it, they wouldn't be so heartless as to leave her in the lurch. However, now, looking at her daughter, who was in such a miserable state, crying and begging for mercy with a bloody face, she could not move her feet. She was afraid that she would be implicated if she went in. She could not take a beating. Chapter 306. Li Dongxiang was not afraid at all. At this moment, he was in public. The other patients and their family members in the ward had already fled the ward in fear. Li Dongxiang was not a busybody. He was only here to find Yuna to repay the debt he owed. He would not cause trouble for other unrelated people. Li Qin, who was standing at the door, was so frightened that her legs turned to jelly. She was so frightened that she wanted to cry, but did not dare to make a sound. She could only hide at the side in panic. Yin Tianyu looked at her coldly. In the face of disaster, the mother-daughter relationship was just this. This was a debt she had caused, so she had to bear it herself. Misfortune came with evil. The wheel of fortune had turned. With that thought in mind, he wanted to leave. However, just as he took a step, he heard Yun Na's anguished screams from the ward. "I really don't have money. Brother Chong, my sister has money. She has money. You can ask her for it. I'm her sister, her only sister. She'll definitely help me pay it back." Yin Tianyu stopped in his tracks. The corners of his eyes were instantly dyed with cold anger. His body emitted a dangerous and frightening aura. He turned his head and looked into the ward. Yin Na was crying bitterly as she hugged Li Dongxiang's trouser leg. She seemed to be clutching at the last straw as she said with reddened eyes, "My sister has money. You can ask her for it. She'll definitely help me pay it back. She was the one who helped me pay the previous debt." Yin Tianyu was startled and clenched his fists tightly. Mommy helped her pay the debt? When he actually did not know? Yin Na, haven't I made myself clear to you that day? Didn't you make me suffer enough last time? You said that your sister was pure, lovely, and a stunner. You even said that you wanted to give her to me to pay off your debt. What happened in the end, though? Not only was your sister not a virgin, but she also had an illegitimate child. More importantly, she had a sugar daddy behind her. I didn't even touch her, and I was almost killed. Do you think I'll fall for your trick again this time? Find trouble with her? Even if you have the guts, I won't dare to. You should be the one asking. I don't dare to provoke her again. Yun Tianyu's brows knitted tightly, and his face turned pale in an instant. Don't force me, Brother Chong. Yun Na cried helplessly. At that time, I really didn't know what kind of sugar daddy was taking care of her. You didn't know, but now you know. Damn it. I've never seen someone as heartless as you. Your elder sister has always doted on you. That day, I sent someone to ask her to collect the debt. From her tone, it seems like this isn't the first time she's cleaned up your mess. If I hadn't threatened her with her son, she wouldn't have cared about you. Suddenly, a child's tender voice came from the door. When did this happen? Li Dongxiang looked back and saw Yun Tianyu standing at the door with a pale face. His beautiful eyes were as deep and empty as a bottomless abyss. Where did this little baby come from? Li Dongxiang frowned and scolded. You don't need to know who I am. Explain what you said just now. Yin Tianyu was not in the mood to care about his rude words. His tone was gloomy and cold, but his voice was unique to a child's, yet it was tinged with a chilling and dangerous aura. Li Dongxiang was stunned. Although the child in front of him looked no more than 6 or 7 years old, he was shockingly mature. His powerful aura almost overshadowed his sharpness. In front of the little boy, he actually lost the limelight. Chapter 307. What did you say? Why should I explain it to you? Li Dongxiang raised his head to look at the crowd outside the door and demanded fiercely, Whose child ran out? Quickly take him away. The crowd dispersed in fright. Yin Tianyu coldly said, Aren't you here to collect the debt? Explain it clearly, and I'll pay for her. You're just a child. Where did you get the money? I have it. Li Hanlin, who was behind him, stepped forward with a smile. Li Dongxiang was even more confused now. Seeing this, Yin Na seemed to see the light of hope. She immediately pointed at Yin Tianyu and said, He is my sister's son. Oh, is that Yin Sure your mommy? You don't have to care so much. I'm just asking you how much does she owe you? Yin Tianyu asked coldly. He did not look at Yun Na, as if he was afraid of dirtying his eyes with just one look. 500,000 yuan. Yin Tianyu tilted his head and said in a low voice, Agently, yes. Li Hanlin immediately took out a stack of checks from his briefcase, wrote a string of numbers on it, signed it, and flashed it to Li Dongxiang. 1 million yuan. Li Dongxiang's eyes widened. Oh, this child is not simple. Yin Na watched with tears in her eyes until Li Hanlin flashed the amount on the check. Her face lit up with hope, but it was soon followed by disbelief. Who was this man in a suit? One look, and one could tell that he was an elite. So why was he so respectful toward Yin Tianyu? Li Qin, who was standing at the door, was also dumbfounded. Who exactly was this man? How could he casually write a check for 1 million yuan? What was more shocking was that this man was submissive and obedient to Yin Tianyu, a child. What was the relationship between these two? Li Qin could not figure it out. Li Dongxiang smiled wickedly and went forward to take the check. Li Hanlin's hand, which was holding the check, moved slightly, and he caught nothing but air. Are you playing with me? Li Dongxiang was slightly annoyed. Yin Tianyu expressionlessly said, You haven't explained what you meant by your words earlier. Li Dongxiang smiled and grabbed Yin Na's collar. He patted her bleeding cheek and said, She's your mommy's sister, right? Heh, he took drugs and gambled outside and owed me a huge debt. But this bitch doesn't have any money. I threatened her and told her that I would go to her house to collect the debt. She was scared silly. Guess what she said? Li Dongxiang was a hoodlum, so his words were naturally sinister. His face was ferocious, and he looked like a ruffian. Yin Tianyu hummed and waited for him to continue. She said that she wants to use her sister to repay her debt. Li Dongxiang said slowly. Yin Tianyu's face instantly changed. It was as dark as ink. His pair of bright eyes immediately seemed to be covered by a dark haze, and a thick, vicious aura constantly surged in his eyes. Go on, he ordered. Li Dongxiang was stunned. He was a little displeased. A child was talking to him with such a condescending attitude. However, he didn't think too much about it, and continued speaking. She said that her older sister was so beautiful and refined. When I heard it, my heart itched. Get to the point. Yin Tianyu was a little impatient. D*MN, you little B** starred. Li Dongxiang was furious. Chapter 308. Li Dongxiang swallowed his saliva and could only continue. She made an agreement with me. She would send her lovely sister here to accompany me for a few nights, and that debt would be written off. Hearing this, Yun Tianyu remained silent for a long time. He only stared at Yun Na with a gloomy expression. His expression was so cold that it was frightening. She didn't succeed in the end, though. In the end, she was kidnapped by the Mu family. The Mu family? Li Hanlin was startled. Muyaja? He. Yun Tianyu suddenly let out a few desolate chuckles. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened and stared fixedly at Yun Na. His gaze was so deep that it seemed to pierce a hole in her body. So that's how it is? He. Yun Tianyu held his forehead with his hand. His desolate laughter echoed in the room, making one's hair stand on end. Yun Na had never seen this side of Yun Tianyu before. In front of Yun Shi, he had always been obedient and adorable. Now, however, he tore apart all his pretense and revealed himself to be cold and deep. It was as if even his surroundings were filled with a frightening aura of hostility, especially his deep eyes, which flashed with a hint of madness and ruthlessness. You? What are you laughing at? He. Yun Tianyu shrugged his shoulders and laughed even more wantonly. He closed his eyes, and those dark memories squeezed into his thoughts. In the scene, Yun Na pressed him onto the bed and ruthlessly slapped his body one after another. She pulled his ears and said in a sinister voice over and over again, "Little B*** star, go ahead and cry. Go ahead and make a fuss. Your mommy isn't at home right now. Let's see who's going to help you. Who will protect you?" Those dusty memories, under the stimulation, broke out of their cage and flashed before his eyes like a merry-go-round. His slightly trembling laughter contained the pain of his memories being torn apart. Li Dongxiang shook his head and sighed. "I didn't expect you to be willing to pay for her debt. Repaying evil with good, isn't it? She harmed your mommy. Don't you hate her?" "Hate?" Yun Tianyu opened his eyes abruptly. There was a flash of murderous intent in his eyes. How could he not hate her? Overflowing hatred. "Sigh, I originally wanted to throw her into the pond to feed the fish. Initially, when he heard that she was going to enter the entertainment industry as a celebrity, he even took a bunch of pornographic photos of her to blackmail her. Now that she was disfigured, her acting career had come to an end. Since you're paying for her debt, I'll give you these photos." Li Dongxiang passed the photo to Yun Tianyu and reached for Li Hanlin's check again. Li Hanlin coldly grabbed his wrist, rendering him unable to move. "Why are you going back on your word? Did I say that I'll repay her debt?" Yun Tianyu's voice was cold and mocking. Yun Na's heart leaped to her throat again. She thought that she was saved, so why was Yun Tianyu going back on his word? Could it be that the check was fake? Did he not mean what he said just now? His heart was like a roller coaster, hanging high for a moment, then falling to the bottom of the valley. "Then what you said just now," Yun Tianyu coldly retorted, "she owes you so much money, yet you're throwing her into the pond. How pitiful is that? Poor mommy. All the grievances she had suffered all these years were written off so easily." Chapter 309. Throwing her into the pond like this is too merciful. He suddenly threw the photo in his hand into the air and sneered. "Chop her up and feed her to the sharks. Her death is not worth pitying." His voice was clearly so innocent, but it was now very deep and penetrating. It was as cold and eerie as the tide. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth, and it was inexplicably hair-raising. Yun Na was so shocked that she hid behind Li Dongxiang in fright. In her heart, Yun Tianyu was no less terrifying than Li Dongxiang, who had been in the underworld for decades. In fact, he might even be more terrifying. Li Qin, who was at the door, was so frightened that she forgot to breathe. At this moment, no one considered that Yun Tianyu was only 6 years old. His words were probably just a child's babble. They only saw the bone-chilling expression on his young face. Cold and hateful, he looked at Yun Na as if she were something filthy. "Little kid, are you joking?" Li Dongxiang laughed awkwardly for a while. How could he be so ruthless at such a young age? It was indeed scary. "Joking," Yun Tianyu said gravely. "My time is precious. Why would I joke with you?" Then, Li Dongxiang's throat was dry. He licked his lips, Even he could not help but respect this 6-year-old boy. You mean, I'll give you the money. You deal with the person. Do you understand? Li Dongxiang was still in disbelief. He looked suspiciously at Li Hanlin, who was beside him, only to see the latter looking down at the little lad with a frown. His eyes were filled with indescribable heartache and complexity. Agent Li, you. Li Hanlin suddenly squatted in front of him and held his shoulders with a worried look. Don't be blinded by hatred. Yin Tianyu did not seem to hear his advice and coldly said, give him the money. He did not want to deal with this kind of person personally. He was afraid that it would dirty his hands. Li Hanlin's expression was complicated. I want you to give him money. Do you understand? Yin Tianyu gripped his wrist with a pale face. His pair of black eyes stared straight ahead. Li Hanlin stared at Li Dongxiang's pale face and frowned. Finally, he stood up and handed the check to Li Dongxiang. Yin Na and Li Qin froze on the spot as if they were struck by lightning. Li Dongxiang seemed to be familiar with this kind of thing. He verified the authenticity of the check and confirmed that it was genuine. Once again, he felt incredulous. This child was not simple at all. At such a young age, he already had a boldness that ordinary adult men couldn't match, and even wealth. Even though he still couldn't figure out his identity, knowing too much might not be a good thing for him. All right, I'll take that person away. When the time comes, I'll take some photos for you to enjoy. Just as Li Dongxiang finished speaking, Yin Na, who was at the side, wailed and crawled to Yun Tianyu's side. Hugging his frail body, she begged for mercy. It's Annie's fault. It's Annie's fault. Annie was blind in the past. It's Annie's fault. Annie swears that I won't bully you or your mommy anymore. Yin Tianyu looked straight ahead as if he did not hear her. He did not even look at her. Chapter 310. How ironic. In the past, whenever Yin Na saw him, she would look at him with cold disdain and call him a little b*****. Now, she was kneeling beside him, kowtowing and begging for mercy. Li Hanlin, who was behind him, bent over and flung her hand away from his shoulder. Li Qin, too, crawled to Yin Tianyu's feet on all fours. Tears streamed down her face as she kowtowed and admitted her mistake. You don't really want to kill us, do you? At least, for the sake of your grandfather, please let us live. You're hiring a hitman. It's illegal and unacceptable. Oh, hiring a hitman. Yin Tianyu muttered to himself nonchalantly and smiled slyly. Did anyone hear that? There was dead silence in the room. Who would believe a 6-year-old child's words? A 6-year-old child hiring a hitman to kill someone was simply a fantasy. In the suffocating silence, Yin Na kowtowed heavily on the floor and said hoarsely, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. She wailed heartbreakingly as she reached out to hug Yin Tianyu. Yin Tianyu did not even look at her and coldly waved her hand away. Don't touch me. It's dirty. Woo woo woo. Yin Na's teary eyes were filled with despair and sorrow. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. Yin Tianyu's shoulders trembled slightly. He turned around and coldly said, Li Qin, 6 years ago, you caused my mommy to become a single mother at the age of 18. She sacrificed herself for the Yun family. But how did you treat her? Abruptly, he enunciated each word clearly. Li Qin, I've long wanted to get rid of you. Yin Na sobbed and begged, give us another chance. Yin Tianyu said, it's not that I didn't give you a chance. You didn't cherish it. Li Qin was stunned. I became so strong in order to protect my mommy. You hurt my mommy again and again. Yet you want me to forgive you? Impossible. With that, he turned and walked out of the ward. Li Dongxiang's men soon arrived. Li Qin cried behind him, you can't be that cruel, right? Yin Tianyu ignored her and quickly left the ward. Behind him were Li Qin and Yun Na's despairing faces. Back in the ward, he closed the door behind him. Yun Tianyu stood at the doorway, looking cold and ruthless. When Li Hanlin saw this, his heart ached, and he hugged him tightly. Her weak body seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow. Although he wasn't his child, after a year of master-servant relationship, he had already treated him as half a family member. After witnessing his ruthless means in the business world, he was in awe of this child from the bottom of his heart. However, in front of Yin Shi, he looked innocent and cute. When he looked at Yin Shi, his eyes were pure and untainted. This purity was without any pretense, as if this was how he should be. However, hatred had dyed this purity black. He originally thought that it was because of his superb acting skills that he was able to switch between the front and the back. But now, it seemed that he no longer thought so. What kind of childhood did this child have that he could do such a cruel thing? Cruel. To a child, it was especially cruel. He did not know how dark his childhood was to be able to gnash his teeth in hatred to kill someone. Chapter 3:11. At the Mu residence, Mu Yaja parked his car in the garage and walked into the living room. Both Mu Sheng and Mu Wanru were there. Grandpa Mu sat in the armchair with a solemn expression. Mu Wanru, who was kneeling beside him, was carefully massaging his legs and massaging them from time to time. Grandpa Mu's face turned ashen when he saw Mu Yaja. He snorted coldly. "You finally know how to come home." "Grandpa." Mu Yaja greeted him. Mu Wanru looked at him. She opened her mouth a few times, but did not say anything. Grandpa Mu slammed the table. He was obviously furious. "Where have you been for the past 2 days? You still know about this house?" "I was busy." "Busy? What were you busy with?" "You were busy with a woman's bed." Grandpa Mu was furious. Mu Wanru immediately patted his chest that was heaving up and down due to his anger. She said gently, "Grandpa, don't be angry. Don't hurt your body. He must be busy with the company's affairs. That's why. He's busy." "Wanru, you're always thinking of him, but has he ever thought of you?" Mu Wanru's face stiffened. Her eyes were filled with grievance. The atmosphere in the living room was extremely tense. It was as if a storm was brewing. Mu Yaja sat on the sofa and brewed a cup of tea. He looked calm, as if he did not care about Grandpa Mu's anger. Grandpa Mu was furious when he saw Mu Siju's nonchalant attitude. "Who did you give the bungalow at Shawnee Walk to?" Grandpa Mu narrowed his eyes. His face was gloomy. Mu Yaja furrowed his brows. It was obvious that his every move in the past few days was being monitored. Grandpa Mu soon heard about what he had done 15 minutes ago. This realization made him somewhat displeased. Hence, he remained silent in the face of Grandpa Mu's interrogation. Not talking, seeing that Mu Yaja was silent, he sat up straight and threw a file in front of Mu Yaja. He asked coldly, "At least explain this matter clearly." Mu Yaja expressionlessly took out a stack of documents and a few photos from the folder and glanced at them coldly. Sure enough, Grandpa Mu had sent someone to investigate Yin Tianyu. Mu Wanru also walked over curiously and picked up the photos. Her expression froze, and her heart sank. She did not know that he was investigating Yin Tianyu. He had no idea. Mu Wanru secretly gritted her teeth. The situation did not develop as she had expected. If Mu Sheng were to investigate Yin Tianyu, he would definitely find out about Yin Shi. At that time, if they found out about the incident from more than 10 years ago, Mu Wanru's heart was suddenly in her throat and her breathing stopped. Mu Sheng was in a fit of anger, so he did not notice her abnormality. He only asked coldly, "Have you investigated this child's matter clearly?" Mu Yaja's deep gaze fell on Mu Wanru, who was unsettled, and he slowly answered, "No. I think this child is about 6 or 7 years old." "When did this happen?" He angrily said, "I don't care how this child came about. Anyway, the Mu family's bloodline can't be outside. Bring him back." Mu Wanru returned to her senses and quickly said, "Grandpa, let's put this matter aside for now. We haven't investigated the matter clearly. Isn't it too hasty to make such a decision?" Chapter 3:12. Mu Wanru's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. Mu Yaja remained silent. Seeing that, Grandpa Mu bellowed, "Give me an explanation for this matter as soon as possible. You summon me back just for this matter?" Mu Yaja frowned. It was not that he had never thought of letting you return to the Mu family. However, now was not the time. He already had solid evidence in his hands, but he was still a little short of it. "Of course not." Grandpa Mu calmed his anger and said in a low voice, Arrange your marriage with Wanru as soon as possible. Mu Wanru's face lit up with joy when she heard that. She pretended to be shy and asked, Grandpa, why so sudden? Marriage. Mu Yaja's eyes twitched dangerously. Why? If you don't arrange it as soon as possible, how long do you want to delay it? She's your fiancée and your childhood sweetheart. Now that both of you are of age, your marriage naturally can't be delayed any longer. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease even if it's delayed for a moment. Grandpa Mu slammed his walking stick on the floor as he yelled in annoyance. Mu Wanru's heart skipped a beat when she saw Mu Yaja's cold face. She hugged Grandpa Mu's shoulders aggrievedly and said, Grandpa, we're not ready yet. What do you need to prepare for a marriage? Both of you are already engaged. It's inevitable that the public will be suspicious of you if you delay the wedding. Besides, Wanru, it's not that I want to nag at you. Even if Yaja doesn't care, you should do more. Are you willing to watch your man be seduced by another woman? Grandpa Mu sized up Mu Yaja as he said that. His voice instantly turned gloomy. Wanru has been with you for so many years. I won't allow you to let her down. Arrange the marriage as soon as possible, understand? Mu Yaja remained silent for a while. Suddenly, his lips curled into a deep smile. I understand, Grandpa. That's good. His answer was like a tranquilizer. Grandpa Mu was finally relieved. Mu Wanru, who was standing at the side, was also overjoyed. She thought that Mu Yaja would try his best to reject the marriage, but he actually agreed to it. Wanru, both of you must be well. Grandpa Mu was overjoyed as he patted the back of her hand gently with a kind look on his face. She reservedly replied, Thank you, Grandpa. Grandpa, I'm tired. I'm going back to my room first. Mu Yaja expressionlessly said that and went upstairs. Grandpa Mu immediately signaled to Mu Wanru with his eyes, and the latter immediately understood. Lifting her skirt, she followed Mu Yaja into the bedroom. Once they were, he, Unrao, and Wanru. And Wanru saw this. Mu's when she when. Then, she immediately went forward to help him change his clothes. The man glanced at her from the corner of his eye. His expression was distant as he dodged her actions. Mu Wanru froze on the spot, as if she had been petrified. His indifference caused her to be at a loss of what to do. She felt uneasy. After pondering for a while, she finally mustered her courage to speak. You seem to be so cold to me recently. Why? Am I? Mu Yaja did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on the floor-to-ceiling window. He casually pulled his collar and took off his shirt. His tone was cold. Mu Wanru's heart tightened. She felt wronged. Of course, you're always cold to me. Why? Haven't I always been like this? His leisurely attitude made her feel even more embarrassed. However, she had no other choice. She could not choose to retreat. There was no way out for her. Chapter 313. Grandpa Mu was whispering in her ear. If the man was not proactive enough, as a woman, she should let go of her modesty. She was proud of her modesty. She used to be so reserved too. However, Mu Yaja was like a proud and free wind, unpredictable. She did not even know how to talk to him to attract his attention. He had been extremely cold to her since they were young. On one hand, it should be his resistance to this marriage. On the other hand, maybe he was not interested in her at all. Mu Wanru clenched her fists and slowly took a step forward. Why don't you touch me? Mu Yaja opened his eyes slightly. His gaze was cold, but he did not say a word. She watched as the man casually pulled off his tie and took off his shirt. His elegant and calm expression made it seem as if she didn't exist. Mu Wanru's face was full of embarrassment. Seeing that he was about to enter the bathroom, she immediately took a step forward nervously and forced a smile. Is it because I'm not attractive to you? Or is it because I'm not proactive enough? She paused and hurriedly said, I can take the initiative as long as you like it. Mu Yaja turned his face away impatiently. Bang! What responded to her was the sound of the bathroom door closing. Click! The door was locked. Mu Wanru's legs went soft, and she collapsed on the ground as if she had collapsed. She rubbed her hair in annoyance and felt wronged. She wanted to cry, but no tears came out. This man had always been so cold. It was the same for everyone. When they were young, Muyaja was not close to her. At first, to her who had just stepped into the Mu family, this young man exuded a heart-palpitating coldness and always avoided anyone who wanted to get close to him. She had no choice but to accept this. For so long, Muyaja had never had a woman by his side, which made her feel more at ease. But why did he have to treat that Yin-Shir? What was so good about that Yin-Shir? Why did this man who had always been cold take her to heart? Thinking of this, Mu Wanru's heart was filled with resentment. No, he had to act quickly. That Alan was incompetent. She had to find another way to get rid of Yin-Shir as soon as possible. Voila! The bathroom door opened. Muyaja walked out of the bathroom in a brocade bathrobe. His tall figure and slightly open collar revealed his sexy and well-defined muscles. She looked even more graceful and luxurious. His slightly damp hair was slightly messy, but it didn't diminish his handsomeness at all. Instead, it made him even more handsome and charming. Seeing that she was still there, Muyaja's eyes flashed with disgust. "Why haven't you left?" Mu Wanru said cautiously. "Grandpa asked me to sleep in your room tonight." "Sleep with me?" The man asked coldly. He lit a cigarette and took a deep puff. He rarely smoked. Unless it was an important social event or when he was extremely frustrated, then he would light up a cigarette. It could be seen that he was not in a good mood tonight. Mu Wanru stubbornly did not move an inch. I know you might not be ready, and I don't want to be so fast, but Grandpa's health is not good, so I can only follow his wishes. He instructed me to do this. I don't want to anger him. I'm afraid he'll hurt his body." Muyaja narrowed his handsome eyes and looked at her. She actually came up with such a dignified reason. Ridiculous. You want me, okay? Chapter 314. Mu Wanru's face was full of shyness. She gently unbuttoned her dress and slowly approached him. As she walked step by step, her long dress fell off her body and fell to the ground. Her fair and smooth body was completely exposed to the cold air. Muyaja's pupils constricted. A hint of suppressed anger flashed in the depths of his handsome eyes. Tonight, I'll give myself to you. You want me, okay?" The woman walked in front of him. A pair of arms slowly wrapped around the man's sturdy waist. Her delicate lips softly pressed against his chest. She was trying to melt his cold heart with her tenderness. When she was looking forward to the man's next move, the man's cold voice came from the top of her head. "Put on." "What?" She was shocked. She raised her head in surprise, but looked into a pair of deep eyes. "Put on and get lost." His voice was as cold as ice colliding. Before Mu Wanru could react, Muyaja fiercely pinched her chin and said with a face full of disgust, "Even if you want to, you have to see if I'm interested in you. I advise you, don't try your best to show off your charm. Don't you think you're very cheap?" "Cheap?" He asked back. "What? Isn't it? Don't you think you're disgusting?" Muyaja pushed her away heavily. "If you want to seduce me, please show me some real ability. Otherwise, it will only make me more disgusted." Mu Wanru was pushed to the ground. She was in so much pain that she frowned. Embarrassed, humiliated, and broken down, she cried with red eyes. "What kind of woman do you like? I can change for you. Do you like Yin-Shir? Pure and innocent? If you were half of her, you wouldn't be so disgusting." Mu Wanru was stunned. Tears flowed freely from her eyes. The man didn't even look at her. He only felt disgusted. He hooked her with his toes and covered her body with her clothes. "Get lost." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, followed by Xiao Yichen's childish voice. "Daddy, can I come in?" The door wasn't locked, so Xiao Yichen tiptoed and pushed the door open. However, as soon as he opened the door, he was greeted with an unbearable scene. He saw Mu Wanru lying on the ground, completely naked, with only a dress barely covering her body. At the side, Muyaja stood coldly at the side, his face as dark as ink. "Daddy!" Xiao Yichen was shocked. His face turned red, and he quickly turned around. I'm sorry, come here." Seeing the little fellow, Muyaja bent over slightly and called out. Xiao Yichen blushed. He had never seen a naked woman before. Since he was young, he had been taught the etiquette of a gentleman. Therefore, it was a taboo. When he heard his daddy's call, He covered his eyes and ran into Muyaja's arms. Muyaja hugged him and covered his eyes with his large palm. He turned his head and glared coldly at Mu Wanru, telling her to get lost. Mu Wanru hurriedly put on her clothes. Embarrassed and angry, she ran away. The door closed again, and silence returned. Xiao Qin pushed his wide palm away and asked curiously, "Daddy, why isn't Mommy wearing any clothes?" "She's hot," Miyaja said calmly. "It's raining outside. It's very cold," Xiao Qin mumbled. The scene just now was too impactful. His heart still hadn't calmed down. "Have you finished your homework?" "Yes. I finished it a long time ago." Xiao Qin smiled and hugged his neck. "I'll sleep with Daddy tonight. Okay?" Chapter 315. By the time Yin Shishir rushed to the hospital, it was already late at night. Perhaps it was because she had not slept a wink the entire night that she fell asleep on the sofa while she was packing her clothes. In the end, a call from her manager woke her up. "Remember to come to Huanyu to sign the contract next Monday." Sure. Congratulations on signing a contract with Huanyu Entertainment. This is a very smooth first step. He called to inform her not to miss the signing ceremony with Huanyu next Monday. She hung up the call and looked out of the window. It was already drizzling. She could not help feeling a little dazed. She had actually entered the entertainment industry. Would her career progress be smooth in the future? She rushed to the hospital and hurriedly pushed open the ward door. Yin Shishir was also a little surprised by the luxurious VIP ward. In the living room, Yu was sitting in Yun Yeching's arms, flipping through the comic the latter had bought in boredom. Only the heavens knew how bored he was to be flipping through the comic books that he usually disdained. When he saw Yin Shishir, he immediately pounced into her arms barefooted. "Mommy, you're finally here? I thought you were going to leave Yu alone in the hospital again." "How could that be?" Yin Shishir reached out and gently patted Yu's head. She only calmed down when she saw that his complexion had regained some color. She smiled slightly and asked, "Yu, have you eaten?" "Yes, I have. If I wait for my stupid mommy to send food over, Yu will be so hungry that smoke will come out of my 7 orifices." Yun Tianyu pouted in dissatisfaction. His tone was full of grievance and resentment. Yin Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. "You even learned an idiom? Did the principal teach you that?" "Cough. It's Yu's mommy who taught me well," Lee Hamlin said awkwardly at the side. Yu coolly said, "My mommy never cares about my homework, nor does she sign me up for any interest classes." Basically, Yin Shishir was not willing to impose any heavy learning on the child. She believed that childhood should be enjoyed. Yin Yeching dialed Li Qin's number, but the call did not get through. He had gone to Yun Na's ward earlier, but she had already left. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't contact the two of them. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. Although he had doubts in his heart, he didn't care about it anymore. Late at night, a van sped along the highway. In the pitch-black carriage, Yun Na slowly woke up. At the instant she opened her eyes, the intense pain that came from her body stimulated her nerves, and she recalled exactly what had happened. After being taken away from the hospital, Li Dongxiang tied her and Li Qin up and threw them into a van. She struggled fiercely, crying and begging for mercy in a heart-wrenching manner. An enormous fear shrouded her heart. She didn't dare imagine that she would fall to such a state. What's going on? What's going on? How could Yin Tianyu be so capable? He was only 6 years old. How could he be so heaven-defying? She seemed to remember that the man in the suit respectfully called him President Yin. President Yin? At such a young age? She had yet to figure out the ins and outs of the situation. Li Dongxiang saw that she was crying and throwing a tantrum, so he knocked her out with a knife. Yin Na only remembered that her vision turned black, and then she fainted and lost consciousness. When she woke up, she was in an enclosed space with no ventilation. It was stuffy and hot. She opened her mouth to call for help, only to realize that her mouth was taped shut. Other than moaning, she could not make any sound.